plan.
Trust the plan.
Yes. All right, I think we've started. Hello, everybody. Hello, everybody. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Break the Rules stream. We are here. We are queer. We are ready to have a wonderful. I mean, I am just so happy and thankful to bring people together to have all these discussions. I want to say once again, everybody who is here who has not subscribed, subscribe right now. I mean that. I cannot stress that enough. Anyway, without further ado, let's go to the guest of honor today. We've got Auron McIntyre joining us,
Finally.
as well as the return of Nigel Carlsbad, as well as the return of Catherine Brodsky, my good friend Catherine. Thank you so much for being with us. So let us start with Auron. You describe yourself as a recovering journalist. Why recovering and why journalist?
Yeah, so I did fall backwards into actually being a beat reporter for a number of different newspapers in my area, and then a senior staff writer for one of the major outlets in my area, and and I say recovering because I'm no longer doing that anymore. I've moved on from that.
You
Um,
won the program. You got your first coin, or
yeah. It's been a good couple of years. I've managed to stay off the smack as long as you don't count YouTube. Going back to and doing something like that. But yeah, no, I definitely got the understanding of kind of how that world works. I wasn't doing anything big. I wasn't writing in huge outlets, but I did get to see a lot about how that sausage is made, especially since my focus was in politics and crime. But I repeat myself. But those were my areas of focus and reporting. And so when I ended up, doing my YouTube videos and talking more and more about how the political system works and how power works, that definitely gave me a kind of a different perspective on how these stories get crafted and how power selects what's going to be pushed forward.
What were some very obvious ways that you saw this manifested, and what were the years that you were active in the media sphere?
So up until about 2 years ago, and so through the first Trump election up until about 2 years ago, and so what I saw was definitely you'd be in these you get into these press junkets, you get into these different events, you're talking to the governor, you're talking to these different politicians, and everybody in these press gaggles is they're all there asking different questions. Everybody's trying to wedge in, and they're all recording the answers, right? Like everybody's kind of got their phone pressed up and they're trying to get the audio recorded, and you'll just walk away and you will see how those stories get crafted. Everybody had the same material, everybody had the same audio, but you'll see how different reporters attempted to shape the way that a different politician would answer. They would ask the same question repeatedly over and over again, desperately hoping to get them to make one slightly different answer that they could finally use to push into the story. And you also notice that those are all the ones that are getting traction. And so you can see how the game is played. You can see that the reporters who are constantly trying to form a narrative and trying to push an official into a particular spot and get a particular answer, they're coming up with wildly different stories than other people who are there with exactly the same ones. And of course, those stories being more exciting are the ones that are going to take flight. They're the ones that are going to get the attention and shape the actual direction of what happens next. And you also get to see how these politicians completely alter the way they act and the decisions they make because of this environment. Because they know they're going to have to face this onslaught from the media on a regular basis, and the media pushing them in these different directions. And like I said, that really opened my eyes to kind of who actually pushes and moves and shapes power.
as being a part of the inner party, if you will. But for those who don't know, but I'm assuming everyone who listens to you is listening to this. You are part of what I consider, and by the way, our good friend Catherine Brodsky is also a journalist that
Yes.
but maybe if she keeps appearing on the show, she won't be a journalist for long. We'll see. She'll get canceled.
Well, we're gonna have this conversation today, and when it comes to Catherine, her credentials, like she's like, I don't know how to describe it. It's like when you see a general with like tons of medals on the shirt. So she is a writer for Variety, Guardian, Washington Post, Playboy, Esquire, Vulture,
Playboy,
Playboy, CNN. So there we go. Like Catherine, she is all over the place.
Well, also our friend Seabrook.
Andrea Seabrook, yes, of
so
NPR fame.
So yeah, but they're not. There won't be journalists for long if they appear on the stream with people like us.
No,
so,
I think there won't be journalists for long, except for the ones that appear on our stream. That's what I'm
true.
Gonna say.
Hopefully,
yeah.
Oh, that's a good one.
But I think Gio is correct.
Oh boy. Well, don't work yourself into a shoot, as they say in wrestling. But Auron, you are someone who I consider part of. There's a new group of YouTubers out there, and they came out of the wake of a lot of. Let me just be really honest with you, a lot of grifters, a lot of people that didn't deserve the clout they had, and there was sort of a refinement of people who were more serious in what they were doing. And you were really the first one, I think, to. Correct me if I'm wrong, but you and Endeavor and a few others. Morgoth to an extent, the first ones to really bring neoreaction to the YouTube sphere, apart from just like blogging and Twitter. And so you have a number of very and please go, everyone in the chat, please go and watch. I fastidiously binge Auron's videos, but you were one of the first ones to actually take those ideas and put them in a package in a way that, because people, let's face it, they're blogging apart from Substack, it's kind of, it's going the way of the dodo, but we're becoming more audio visual creatures. And so you've managed to carve out a niche where you take these serious, high-minded concepts from neoreaction and you put them in YouTube form. And so when people are gaming, which I'm assuming they're doing, then people can watch them. And so I commend you, my friend, and you are an inspiration, really.
Well, this is kind of a stupid question for those who already know, but for those who don't, what is neoreaction? How would you define it?
Sure. And thank you very much, Gio. I really appreciate that. And I wasn't the first, to be clear. Dave the Distributist probably deserves a lot of
friend of the
show. On our show as well. Yeah.
Dave reserves a lot of credit. He's the guy who turned me on to Mencius Moldbug. He's the guy who introduced me to that kind of philosophy. Guys like Endeavor and Charlemagne had been around for years talking about it. But I definitely, when I was first started reading this stuff last year during the lockdowns, like when lockdowns really got into full swing. And at the time, I had heard about this, but I'd gotten some of the ideas from, like I said, from watching the Distributist videos, but I'd never really dug deep. And I'm a guy who really likes political theory. It's something that fascinates me. It's what my degree is in. It's what I like to read in general.
It was also my degree, but one of them, by the way. But, yeah,
so we made the same mistake, which is good.
Yes. I have a story about that, but please go ahead.
But yeah. So with everything going on, post-Trump election, with the lockdowns happening, as somebody who's worked in politics, as somebody who was reporting on politics, I had a very particular idea of how it was supposed to work. And whatever was happening made no sense, right? Like the world made no sense according to what I had learned in school about politics, what I had preached, what I had taught. It just didn't make any sense. What I reported on, nothing was working the way it was supposed to. And so I started reading, this guy, Mencius Moldbug, Curtis Yarvin. He writes under his real name now. And Yarvin, what he does is he goes back and I've learned this more as I've dove deeper into the theory. I didn't know it at the time, but he has rescued a lot of what we call reactionary political theory. A lot of guys like James Burnham, Joseph de Maistre, guys like Carl Schmitt, de Juvenal. Absolutely. These guys who have a very, let's be honest, Machiavellian understanding of how power works. And he did a very good job of updating those ideas from their, 18th, 19th century origins and applying them to kind of the media and technological environment and culture environment we see today. And it was such a powerful analysis that I was reading this stuff that was from 2008 that was basically predicting exactly the world I lived in now. And so I found that very compelling. And so when I saw this stuff, I was watching these other videos from these other guys, and they did a great job. But I come from, like I said, a reporting background that was very internet reporting. It's very boil it down, get it out quick, make it readable. Let's be honest, everybody's scrolling through this on the toilet. Exactly. I'm used to churning content. And so I was like, well, I've got a set of skills. Let's apply it to this. And so that's how I ended up, taking that content and try to turn it into kind of more bite-sized, understandable things for people who aren't going to chase down 500 pages of blogs in random places scattered across the internet.
And your tweeting style as well is very much, it's like if you were to take like a mainstream reporter and make him woke and to what we're talking about, and you're very like straightforward, to the point. Whereas Carlsbad here, he's the total opposite. He'll jam in like screen caps of multiple paragraphs, citations. But so then you sort of traveled through that journey in this span of time. Did you? I'm assuming you started off as a normie conservative, or how does that?
Yeah. But like I said, my degree was in political science. I had planned to work in politics. I ended up working on, Republican political campaigns, that kind of thing. Like I said, I inadvertently ended up falling into the reporting thing. I hadn't planned on that, but because of my political experience, someone ended up putting me in that position. And yeah, I had the pretty much exactly the like roughly neocon talk radio GOP positions you'd expect, right? But like I said, just the deeper I got into this, the less those things made sense, and the more these more clear explanations of power and motives really made far more sense, and that's what I've been exploring ever since.
Well, let's get into something heavy, because it's interesting. We have Carlsbad here with you. Let me ask just a really general, I guess it's pertinent now, since his return, if you will. Carlsbad, what is, you have criticisms, but what would you say is the legacy of Moldbug and his writing? And maybe really quickly, Auron, you go, and then Carlsbad, because I know Carlsbad, he's really critical of this.
Well, before going deeper into
Moldbug, we
again,
should.
for the people who don't know, how exactly would you define neoreaction in like the simplest terms, like the
Yeah. So neoreaction is a form of political analysis, I think, is the best way to look at it. It's a form of power analysis. It's about how these things work, and what it's trying to do is look at the world and say, let's scrape away the all the kind of abstractions that we've layered on the modern world. How does power actually work? We look at something like the 16th century, and we could look at something like that and understand who's involved: the church, the king, the peasants, the nobility, all these different power centers, and how do they actually apply. When we look at the modern world, many people look at the modern world and they say, oh, well, we have popular sovereignty, we have democracy, we have rule by the people. We have all these, we have limitations on power and separations of power that keep things from working this way. And there's a lot to neoreaction. Trying to boil it down in a paragraph doesn't really work. But if I was going to say anything about it, I'd say that it basically says, what if humanity didn't change? What if human nature is still the same? And what if we still need churches to tell us the certain things? And what if kings really are still in control? Like, what if a lot of the kind of the mechanics of power that we've pretended that have been updated and we're too modern to need to pay attention to, what if they're actually still there working under the surface, and we've just layered a lot of fancy words on top of things to pretend like we no longer function this way? Like I said, there's a lot to neoreaction. I don't think that really captures the whole thing, but if you want me to put it in a paragraph, that's the best I could do.
Well, that's asking the question as far as whether the systems are still in place. But would there still be, let's say, a proposition, like a solution, like now that we are aware of this, what is step two? Do we accept this? And if we don't accept this, what do we accept?
Yeah, so solutions are notoriously the worst part of neoreaction. It's like I said, it is much more a descriptive thing than a proscriptive thing. There have been efforts to make a prescriptive. Moldbug himself, Yarvin himself, does have a number of different solutions. He wrote a lot more about solutions in his original work in Unqualified, Reservations. He had Patchwork, these neo-cameralism solutions where basically you have like CEOs become kings and they run their own small countries, and you have no say in each country, but you have any form of exit you want. I don't think these are applicable. I don't think these are really workable solutions. And I think it's best if we understand, and this is just me, this is not me speaking for anybody or any movement or anything, but I think it's best if neoreaction is understood purely as an analysis of how power works rather than a set of solutions. Anything that's going to be solution based is going to require a certain kind of passion and a certain kind of vision for the future that I think the cold systems power analysis of neoreaction kind of lacks. And so I think it's a good tool to have in your box, but I don't think it's a answer to everything in and of itself, if that makes sense.
Yes, it does. Before we keep going, I just want to say again, all the new people subscribe, and also I want to shout out to Alexander Polyakov, who is joining us here. I believe that you are working on a new drawing right now, and I love your early 90s shirt that you have on.
Okay.
It's very nice.
It's very much a Memphis, 90s Memphis.
Oh, yeah, thank you.
And also, I want to go to Catherine Brodsky before we turn to Moldbug and ask Catherine. Catherine, do you have any questions right now for Auron based on what he said so far? Anything that needs to be cleared up?
Not yet, but I'm sure I will.
Excellent.
Or maybe, Catherine, what do you think as someone, Auron being someone who was in the inside, now he's on the outside looking in, but someone who's very much in the inside of journalism, what is the sort of picture like? Why do you think people have left your profession, or what Auron has said about your profession? Maybe if if you were to be honest about the state of journalism, it's not doing too well from what I've heard.
Yeah, I mean, some people think that's not going to exist anymore, and that all the journalists are going to be living on Substacks. I do not think that's the case, because I don't think you can make that work for a lot of types of journalism. I think it's become an environment where people have become kind of activists through journalism as opposed to actually reporting. And I think maybe that's one of the biggest problems that I'm seeing, is that people are just well, I mean, there's a few things that are going on, right, that contributed to this. It's first of all, I think a lot of it is actually financial. I think, when the internet came to be and stories became free, it became even harder than ever before to sort of have publications. Also, publications used to be, everybody read kind of the same ones. And now there's more. I would argue, actually, there's probably more than ever. There's a lot of different media outlets in the world. But it makes it even harder to get that audience. And then because they're giving away content for free, that means now they're making shorter stories. They're paying writers less. If you pay writers less, writers have less time to do good work on the stories, right? So you're not going to get the same quality. You're not going to have the same level of investigative journalism. And what was said about the press conferences, and everyone's trying to sort of spin their own version of the story and trying to get the clicks and the clickbait. That's a huge part of it as well, because it's all about the clickbait. And honestly, it doesn't matter if your story is good or not, right? It's all about, is that person going to click on it in that moment? And that doesn't necessarily take a good story. So that's a huge problem. I don't know if a lot of people are leaving journalism per se. I think maybe a lot of good people are leaving journalism.
Wow. Yeah. Could you imagine, I'll give you an example. Could you imagine just, and maybe one day Lev, he'll come on the show. I mean, that'd be like that would be a sheer drop brainbuster for our audience. But for example, could you imagine 10 years ago someone like Glenn Greenwald getting interviewed by our good friend Nicolo Salo on Substack? Like that, to me, when I saw that interview, that was wild. Like that's, the guy who runs Salo forums interviewing Glenn Greenwald. So that we live in an interesting world now.
Yeah, Glenn was on a Clubhouse the other day too. So,
oh yeah.
A lot of people seem to think that journalists can be just like regular people reporting who have some expertise. And I mean, I guess that depends on how you define journalism. And I guess how I defined journalism, how I saw that, is somebody who's a professional question asker and question answerer, right? So, it's about the research, about how you present the information, how you write the story. You may not be an expert, but you're good at finding experts. And so when it turns from that to something else, then it becomes a problem. And I think that's sort of what's been happening in the world today, is that people aren't asking questions. They're also, they're presenting one particular side. And it's always been interesting to me, even if it's a side I disagree with. And a lot of the things that I like to talk about are things that I actually might have disagreements about. But that's so important in terms of like actually having a strong point of view and giving the reader something to actually think about. And I think it's far more persuasive if you can present both arguments and let somebody decide, right? If you really truly believe in whatever your belief is, you kind of need to be able to challenge that.
What's funny, I was watching one of Auron's videos where he talks about this approach to sort of like the open marketplace of ideas is sort of like dying, and maybe it was a fiction to begin with. But well, we could get into that, but we have two good observations. One is by our good friend of the show, Zero HP Lovecraft. ZHP says that journalists that can't survive on Substack, they will die out and they deserve so. And another one by our patron Buff, can women become clear-pilled? Auron, can women become clear-pilled?
Wait.
Or is it impossible?
What does that even mean? Can I understand this a little?
Auron, what does clear pill mean?
We might be way too deep into the jargon way too early.
That's what I keep saying. That's what I keep saying to you people.
Well, I know red pills. I know blue pills. I have not heard clear pill yet.
So one of the things that Yarvin is kind of known for is he's actually a guy who kind of invented the red pill terminology.
Yeah.
He was the first guy to use it way back in 2008. And it kind of got popularized way beyond him. Way more people know about that terminology than know about neoreaction.
And the Wachowskis hate him because of it.
Yes, so. They do. They really do. But one of the things that Yarvin is big on is that basically active political participation will not change the system we're in. It's not going to change because people who are right-wing go out and protest. It's not going to change because they go out and try to get certain people elected. The system is arrayed in a way where it's not going to allow certain forces to move forward in the culture. And so because of that, one of the best things you can do is learn to find other avenues to move, to kind of better yourself, better your community, move yourself forward, and prepare for a time in which you will have the option to make more significant changes. Become worthy is the terminology that often gets used. And so the clear pill is this idea that rather than becoming obsessed with what you can do and how you can become important and how you can become politically active in a major way, understanding that that often becoming politically disengaged and instead learning to spend your time bettering yourself and your family, kind of building your power level is a better use of your time currently than actively trying to get involved in movements that are going to get co-opted or not going to have a chance of really moving the ball forward.
Wow, that's probably the best definition. I was even confused a little bit initially about the clear pill, but you've spelled it out. But I'm curious.
Well, Catherine, I just want to make sure we get your take. What do you think about the clear pill now that it's been explained?
I feel bad.
Well, the chat is going to explode after that. So
I know. You know what? It's funny too because I was, to be honest, I was reading the chat and it was.
That was your first mistake.
Never read the chat.
And I was thinking, okay, because some people are saying things like journalists of the past being subjective is a lie, and that's not true. I mean, I think there's always a level of subjectivity. I just think there was a little bit more nuance to the way that things were covered.
Well, does it depend on the era? Because there was the yellow journalism back in the day,
Yeah.
so that was pretty, you know.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm thinking in the times more recently where, you know, I grew up reading and really admiring and loving things like The New Yorker, you know, which does have a particular slant, I'm sure, for sure. But
oh God, the last 5 years has not been kind to the New
well,
Yorker.
yeah, I haven't read it, to be honest, in the last 5 years.
Oh God. Yeah.
But I used to, but when I grew up, I used to, and then a lot of people were commenting about women, and there's all these comments about women being social justice warriors.
Yeah, women are passionate about social justice. Buff says I patronize many women. I wonder what that means, Buff.
No, Buff, you have to become a patron of our show because Gio called you a patron. No, he's not. No, he's not. This is why you have to become a patron. Patreon.com/breaktherules.
Well, he could take some of that money from patronizing women, if you know what I mean, and towards break the rules. So, but Carlsbad, I wanted to get your take. How do you assess if you were to go to someone? I may be getting into the weeds of here because it's Carlsbad, but if you were to go to like just someone who is like a total normie, what would you say neoreaction is, and what is your general? I know you have many thoughts and criticisms, but just really quickly, what would be your take on the legacy of Moldbug?
Yeah. So, in terms of neo-reaction in general, I would describe it as a kind of synthesis between evolutionary psychology, game theory, pickup artistry, and a little bit of Moldbug's ad hoc historical takes. Honestly, I think the phenomenon is two-faceted. On one hand, its legacy, it has left very little. I mean, to be honest, NRX has basically burned out, in my estimation, several years ago. Its heyday was around, basically, I think 2014, 2015, when you had like all the old bloggers like, Spandro, Henry Dampierre, Jim. There were many others like Handel who stopped blogging. The thing about Moldbug specifically, yes, I am quite critical. Because for one thing, he's a ruthless, logical positivist. For one thing, that's what formalism ultimately is. His knowledge of Christianity is basically non-existent. I mean, to give you a quick example, the term crypto-Calvinist, historically...
we were getting into this on Twitter, yes.
It has a specific meaning. It means a Lutheran who denies the real presence of Christ in the Eucharist, which ultimately led, of course, for example, to the Concord formula in like the late 16th century, which defined Lutheran dogma. He uses this very loosely to mean effectively liberal. For example, also Sir Robert Filmer, the defender of Anglican absolutism, Moldbug calls him a Catholic, which is absolutely ridiculous given that Filmer was explicitly responding to the Catholic natural law philosophy of Robert Bellarmine and Francisco Suarez. Like that's a complete historiographic faux pas. It's incredible. His understanding of classical international law is also nonsense. Like people like Emer de Vattel, for example, who are basically Enlightenment naturalists, he portrays them as some sort of reactionaries, which is ridiculous again. The way he revived Machiavellianism, I mean, Machiavelli's name for most of history was effectively synonymous with the devil for good reason, because Machiavelli, his ultimate legacy was to disassociate the virtues of a ruler from his state, from the way he governs. He subjected political virtues to necessity, to expediency, to reason of state, essentially. Pure like Machtpolitik. He did popularize the Italian elite school of Gaetano Mosca, Vilfredo Pareto, Robert Michels.
Elite theory, yes.
But now these elite theorists, they have a very specific historical context. They emerge effectively from Italian unification.
Yeah.
Most of these people, they're bourgeois liberals who basically become dissatisfied with the state of parliamentary government. They're not really reactionary in like the sense of they're like counter-revolutionaries. They're people who are basically concerned with, liberalism not living up to its true ideals. In fact, the clearest example is Robert Michels, his work on political parties. Why did he write that book? Well, the reason he wrote it is because he was a socialist, later became a fascist. But at the time he was a socialist, and he was wondering why the SPD, the German Social Democratic Party, these people have been around for 20 years. They have a massive political base. Why aren't they starting the revolution yet? And the answer is, you see, it's the iron law of oligarchy. That's the reason. I could go on and on critiquing Moldbug. That's not really the point. But overall, I think his just various grave historical misinterpretations in all sorts of aspects. He does, I will admit, the best part of him are the primary sources that he quotes regarding history. Like, for example, on loyalism, the Confederacy. He had a great source book regarding World War II. So he did uncover a lot of good historical gems, but pretty much all of his descriptive philosophy has aged quite badly, in my opinion. So that would be my take in general.
Wow, that was holy crap. But yeah, I mean the criticism of Machiavelli, but
I want to add, so to understand Moldbug, he was writing around 2008, 2009, right? So this was during the Bush era blogosphere. And liberals back then were very different, as you might remember. You had, of course, liberals were fighting against the evangelical Christian right,
the religious right, the moral majority.
Who were gonna ban evolution from being taught in schools. Not like they give a damn about evolution, of course, but that he was talking about the kinds of liberals who read the Daily Kos, who complained about free speech zones that Bush
that
was
went
imposing.
On Democratic Underground back.
You remember the South Park Republican? That's the kind of person that Moldbug was addressing in the open letter to open-minded progressives. He was addressing a kind of sincere liberal committed to value pluralism, equality before the law, things like that, liberal values in the old sense. And he was trying to tell them, all right, look, man, the world doesn't work the way you think it does. The world works on the basis of these Machiavellian elitist principles, and democracy is a sham. Democracy obscures sovereignty, which is absolute, indivisible, and always runs latent in any form of government. But what ended up happening, of course, is that the left progressives and liberals today are ruthless Machiavellians who want to crush their political enemies. So, teaching them about Machiavelli was a very bad idea in retrospect. And also, democracy. Liberals no longer believe in democracy at all. I mean, there was actually a book by this left libertarian guy, Jason Brennan, came out 5 years ago. It was very positively reviewed in mainstream sources, where he called for an epistocracy, a rule by the expert elite, And of course, these days, we hear all about how, unfettered free speech is giving rise to fascism, so on and so forth, the evils of populism. So liberals no longer believe in democracy either. So this entire NRX critique of democracy is completely irrelevant. The fact of the matter, and plus the fact that Moldbug's critique isn't particularly good either, because the whole. I'm not gonna get into sovereignty because that's the whole kind of.
Yeah, that's a bit too.
I'm closing here.
Wow, that's been something else. But Lev, why did you hold up a transformer when he was talking about?
Because I put an image. Okay, this has to do with Buff, because I put an image of Power Rangers SPD, because that was one of the Power Ranger shows, because Buff mentioned SPD, the political party, and then Buff wrote, "Show us your Megazords." So I did what Buff said. There we go.
He's appeasing the fans.
Oh God! But shameless fan service. But Auron, if you were to defend, perhaps defend Moldbug, because that was very interesting and nuanced critique. But what would you make of that assessment of Moldbug's legacy?
So I think that there's plenty to be said about the sprawling work of a very unfocused blog in 2008 from a guy who was a tech entrepreneur writing about political theory and history. And you'll have plenty of critiques to make, and they'll probably be right. I don't think that Moldbug's canon is perfect or unassailable. I do think saying that it doesn't make impressive predictions about the future is just incorrect. I think if you read it, you read what he points out, the systems he points out, the way he lays out power, and what he expects to happen with it, and you look at the world around us. I think obviously everyone's going to have to make their own analysis on that. I think it's pretty impressive. I disagree with Moldbug on plenty of stuff. I am myself a Christian, and I think that's pretty central moving forward for our culture and our society. Moldbug is, basically, and he says this, right up front, I'm basically a progressive guy, who lived in a progressive world, raised by progressive parents. I am these people. I have these values. And so even my values might differ pretty significantly and so therefore what I think is a positive vision for the future would differ significantly. I don't think you need to agree with every like I said, every facet of the work to find it valuable. This is true of other authors that were pointed out, like Spandrel, guys like Nick Land. I don't agree with Spandrel or Nick Land's vision of the future, what they want, what they think is good for society, any more than I agree with a number of thinkers who I think are valuable to understand and have powerful models that make accurate predictions about politics and how power works. I don't think that I don't think it's wise to discard people because of like Plato got stuff wrong, right? Like nobody actually wants to live in the Republic. That doesn't mean you don't read the Republic, right?
You're putting Moldbug aside.
I am not.
Plato.
I am not. But what I'm saying is, if Plato can be wrong, then clearly other people can probably be wrong and still have valuable insights. Moldbug is most certainly not Plato, but what I am saying is I don't think it's fair to discard the entire analysis because of the parts of which maybe you don't agree with long term.
Well, about Spandrel, I mean, I don't agree with his sort of well, it's interesting, the human biodiversity thing. I think I wouldn't agree with necessarily like this sort of dogmatism around Evo Psych and things like that. But I mean, the ideas that he has produced in terms of IQ Shredder, his blog post about the future of social media, things like that, I think are fundamental. And I mean, even Bioleninism, and I have my criticisms about how effective it is going to be in the future, and he blocked me for it before he got banned. But you got banned, Spandrel, so fuck you. No, I'm kidding. If Spandrel wants to come on the show, but I think Bioleninism is sort of like a concept that is pretty much, I mean, come on, we're living through it right now. So, and for those who don't know, Bioleninism is the theory that loyalty is ensured by taking select groups of people and sort of reifying their identities and therefore promoting them into these managerial systems, into what they call the PMCs, the private managerial class, professional managerial class.
What does reifying mean? Sorry, Gio.
Like reifying, well, it comes from like the term of like bringing something into existence. So you are sort of like bracketing something, you are making it into a concrete form. I mean, I'm butchering the definition, obviously, but you're sort of taking those core identities that are normally disparate and sort of contradictory, and you are, through various methods of intersectionality and so forth, you are creating an inside party of the sort of functionary class by taking these people who usually would be at the bottom of the social hierarchy and promoting them into positions of power, and therefore ensuring maximum loyalty to the system itself. And I think that's a good idea. I think it ends when like you basically have idiocracy, and like the vast majority of people are just total incompetent retard. Incompetent idiots. I try to avoid the R word, but I think those ideas are apt. But in terms of this Auron, would you agree that the left has become more Machiavellian, though, and sort of that? And Carlsbad, I kind of would disagree as well. I think that as much as I think Machiavelli got the ball rolling in terms of disenchantment and other things, I don't know, but would you describe the modern left as Machiavellian? In other words, Auron?
I would say that the left is far more aware of what it takes to wield power and what it means to wield power. And I think they're far more willing to do what it takes to acquire it and move the ball forward in that area. I think that as the left has become more in love with its own kind of noble lie, as over the years it has told itself this story about who and what it is and why it came to power, it's kind of losing that. And I know it's weird to say that as we see them in ascendance to kind of their most, formally powerful they've been in a long time. But I think I think that the majority of the people, and this is kind of part of Bioleninism in a way too, the people who are driving the machine are no longer the people who designed the machine. And so the people who are now kind of operating the left wing, power machine are no longer the people who understood how it got kind of built in the first place. They are doing things like slamming the door behind them with free speech, but that was always going to happen. Like free speech was something that was, these kind of values of you should be able to go out and destroy your society and say whatever you want and challenge every single value were things that allowed the left, radical left, to enter power. They were there to open the door, and they were always going to get slammed behind as soon as they were done. As the Dune quote, when I was weak, I used when I was weak, I asked for freedom because it was according to your principles. When I was strong, I take away your freedom because it's according to my principles.
Yeah.
And that's kind of was always going to be the evolution of the way the left was going to view, the open marketplace of ideas.
I'm very curious in what you think of this article from 2013, written by our good friend from the, as I call it, Star Slater Codex. I know that's not what it's called, but I'm talking about Scott Alexander, called We Wrestle Not with Flesh and Blood, but Against Powers and Principalities. I don't know if, have you read this article before?
No, I know of Scott Alexander. I know that Moldbug has written some articles on him and responses to his work and his situation of kind of being canceled recently. I know at some point he wrote some kind of takedown of neo-reactionary theory, but honestly, I'm not super
actually support. Well, in the end, concluded support for.
Yeah, I heard from a number of people that his attack on NRX is what made them believe NRX was correct. Yeah,
I want to. Well, despite that, I want to read a little bit of it at the end. This is just like the juicy points that he wrote down in short after the long ones. So he says over here, we noted that the driving force of large-scale historical change was technological progress, that societies underwent cultural evolution into forms that were most adapted to the technological conditions of their age, that this evolution was convergent and even unconnected civilizations like Ramses' Egypt and Montezuma's Aztecs could come to resemble each other when they faced similar material problems. We then noted that what looks like political progress from the outside is just humans reacting to the shifting landscape of incentives. Although feminism appears as a movement spearheaded by particular feminists who got it into their head that feminism was a good idea and so decided to push it, a casually useful ideology, that's an interesting word, of feminism would trace the technological conditions that predestined it to arise and succeed. We accused reactionaries of condemning or excusing such movements as if they were contingent human creations and of acting like... Hold on, there's noise coming from Alexandra, I think. Okay, we excused the reactionaries of condemning or excusing such movements as if they were contingent human creations and of acting like pushing a few humans or institutions out of the way here or there would change them. Instead, we concluded that they were vast tides in the affairs of women or men, and any attempt to order them around was hubris worthy of King Canute. Then we accused reactionaries of a bit of a double standard excusing traditional society's lesser wealth and health by placing the blame on technological progress, but being unwilling to let progressives do the same in areas where technological progress has inevitably made us worse off, such as the production of feelings of social alienation. Finally, we accused reactionaries of arguing that past societies were well adapted without specifying well adapted to what. We hypothesized that if forced to finish the statement, it would end up with well adapted to the technologies and conditions of the centuries they flourished. The very fact that they stopped flourishing and were replaced by our society suggests they are well less adapted to conditions today. Or as G.K. Chesterton puts it in a different context, there is one broad fact about the relations of Christianity and paganism which is so simple that many will smile at it, but which is so important all moderns forget it. The primary fact about Christianity and paganism is that one came after the other. If Mr. Lowes Dickinson speaks to them as if they were parallel ideals, even speaks as if paganism were the newer of the two and the more fitted for a new age, he suggests that the pagan ideal will be the ultimate good of man, but if that were so, we must at least ask one more curiosity than he allows for. Why it was that the man actually found his ultimate good on earth under the stars and threw it away again. I do not think these problems completely disprove reaction. They are merely wall off several potential lines of argument in its support. The argument that ancient cultures empirically achieved better outcomes than our own, and the argument that they were more stable and better adapted. So, what do you think?
Yeah, so that's a lot of text to analyze.
I know. Yes, I know. I kind of threw it all out
Yeah.
there all at once.
My general reaction from just what I caught there would probably be that there is we're kind of trained in a common belief that the most modern thing is the best, like the thing that history moves in a particular direction. It is, the progress of history, the moral arc of history is long, but it bends towards justice. This kind of idea that the history is always moving in a positive direction. I think that there's a lot of danger when we pretend that's the case. I don't think every development is a good development. And that doesn't mean there aren't good thing. Obviously, I'm pretty glad that I don't die of an infection. If I get a cut on my arm. So obviously, like one of the things that people will say is things like, well, reactionaries, they just don't want technology to exist. They all want to go back to, you have to live exactly like someone lived in the 1500s to be a real reactionary, get rid of penicillin. I don't think that that's correct. I think that what and again, this is speaking for me. I can't define this for everybody who's ever used the phrase reactionary. What I think of when I think about this is realizing that family and social structures that existed in previous societies created far more stability and community than the ones we have today. And there are needs that humans have. There are things that humans rely on for each other through community, through religion, through all these different things that didn't magically disappear because we figured out like universities and birth control and the internet. And when we pretend that the technology removes the needs for those things and that we have solely made a positive move as a human species simply because technology has advanced and the social order that it comes with is positive, I think we're making a mistake.
I think that's a really an interesting point, that I just wrote that, there's a reason why we have dystopian movies, right? Because not everything that society does is necessarily moving us in the right direction. So being kind of aware of that, but also figuring out, like, how do we figure out where is the right move and where it's not? Because some things I do think have gotten better. And maybe I am one of those social minded women that were being referenced in the comment section, but, or social justice or whatnot. But, I think certain things, because, I do believe in individualism and people having freedoms and rights. Like, to me, that's a good thing. It might not be such a good thing to someone else because maybe it doesn't serve them in the same way. But, but how do we kind of I think things kind of develop we don't really realize where we go wrong until years later, right? Like, we even take something like social media, which in the internet, which had some great things about it and some horrible things about it. And we only kind of realize that when we have that, hindsight. So
Well,
as a society, I wonder how you would say we should figure that out and assess that before it's kind of too late.
Well, Alexander says over here that you could agree that in order to save reaction, you could agree that cultures evolve, but that for some reason the cultural evolution mechanism has gone berserk over the past 100 years. And to make this stick, you'd have to give some reason why this would happen. And you'd have to prove that it was so berserk that the best we can do is reboot it from a saved copy before its breakdown. But what do you think of that?
Like that language.
A lot of things.
Yes, I know it's a very
no, but I think that's probably like not like Carlsbad. You bring up like the positivism aspect. I think that's probably my critique, certainly of neoreaction, or even like the rationalists in general. Which is like, I mean, granted, if you were to posit that neoreaction came from like less wrong culture, the rats, neo-rats, whatever. I can't believe it's not rationalism.
No, it comes from libertarianism. I mean, it's fairly obvious to read the...
Yeah, but I think like that, even the language of like rebooting a culture is like social technology, which I mean, yes, it's a good model, but
horrible.
Well, before you get to that, Carlsbad, I just want to mention that Jules said in the chat that apparently they just kicked off James O'Keefe from Twitter. I knew that was coming. It's like, do you remember that one scene in The Sopranos where Vito, they were all hanging out at the job site, and then someone made a joke about Eugene's wife. Paulie Jr. made a joke about Eugene's wife, and he starts beating the crap out of him. Then Vito just goes, "I knew that was coming." So, but that goes to the point that, Auron, what you were saying is that James O'Keefe is a guy that is doing ostensibly what the left used to do back in the day, where you capture people on video, they don't know what they're saying, or rather they don't know who they're saying it to. But really, I mean, after all of those videos of Project Veritas interviewing, I don't know, some head of the Southern Poverty Law Center that says that we're gonna like get these evil racists off of social media or whatnot. It's like it doesn't matter anymore, right? Like I hate to say this, I hate to be cynical, but has James O'Keefe, his work in journalism, has that really like moved the needle? Or is it just going to move the needle for, like, I don't know, people that watch Fox News or whatever? So
I'm not familiar with John O'Keefe. Who does he?
He runs Project Veritas,
Okay.
which is a conservative, like, they do things like they'll like journalists will pretend to be like activists, and they'll have like GoPro cameras, and they'll like interview people who are in positions of power, and they'll say something like conservative red meat and stuff like that. And he puts these videos, like I think he was the one that broke the Google story where the guy you don't even realize his name anymore. The Google
no, the big
guy.
one was, you remember the Planned Parenthood abortion one?
Yes,
that was the one that exploded.
I think there's a problem with like how we've got, somebody like him is making really who's watching that content. Like I would imagine more conservatives, right? And people on the left who's watching their content. And that I think is probably one of the biggest problems, is that people create this content and it's that basically reinforces what people already think. And I'd really love to find a way that we can create something where people really have that interaction and because I've even talked to a few people who've sort of been canceled, on the left, and they say that the only media outlets that will have them
are conservative.
Yeah, exactly. And they're not even conservatives. That's the thing, right? They're not even conservative.
Yeah, well, what did Barry Weiss do right after she went to Dave Rubin? I mean, come on.
Right.
Not that he's a conservative. Well,
not quite, but like close, right? And this has happened to a few people I know who have a similar kind of profile to that. So, and when we have these conversations, they say, well, it's not that I want to go on these conservative platforms. It's like they just don't really have a platform to go on. And I would love to see or figure out some way where, hey, like like.
But where they even differ from the conservatives at this point? Like, I don't know, how different are they from the conservatives in most things that they talk about?
Well, yeah, they must.
The political ideology has moved too, because I think people on the and I'm not conservative, so maybe I don't know, but like my feeling is that within the conservative side of things, there's a lot of people who are, I would count more as like libertarians, or people who just are just kind of tired maybe of what's kind of going on in the culture, aren't necessarily full-on conservatives in the sense of like, you know, let's restrict people's rights. You know, they might not even, you know, things like, you know, abortions and things like, you know, different human rights. I don't know. Like that's not. I don't know why Love is cracking up.
Is that Nick Land? Is that Nick Land?
Oh, it is. It is. Yeah.
Oh my god.
I
think the Red Brown Alliance is based. Did you see that Daily Beast? That hit piece where they like take I don't know, the Red Scare Girls, Glenn Greenwald, who else? The
like,
person who I don't want to name on the show anymore because he's whatever, and they like say, well, they're just like Bronze Age pervert, and the Nick Sallow and who else? Some other Andrew Anglin, obviously. So it's like all these people who were like even Marxists, they're now according to the Daily Beast, they're now in line with Bronze Age pervert. And
this is driving me crazy because as you know, especially if you're on the left, if you know people on the left, whatever place you are in.
Oh, and they mentioned Moldbug too.
Why do you not have these conversations? And that I think that's the most frustrating thing. Like if somebody goes against whatever that movement is and they get canceled, we never like people who should hear their stories and could still disagree with them, by the way. They can, you know, maybe they're wrong to that many ways, but they're not hearing their stories. They just get kind of removed, and then they become de facto conservatives because conservatives will kind of embrace them more. And so fundamentally wrong. No, go ahead, Aaron.
So actually, this process is super useful to the left. And the thing to understand about this is that this is an unescapable pull that takes our culture and our media and everything else, our politics, that direction. Because what you're talking about is basically all your 1990s Democrats are now conservatives, right? Just like, no, literally, like you can't hold like Barack Obama's position on gay marriage when he was elected will now get you fired from every major corporation in America.
There's a great French term for this phenomenon, by the way, Cynicism. You can look it up. Go ahead.
Okay. But this is a very useful process because what happens is you simply keep sliding that Overton window to the point where you push, you keep pushing these people over to the conservatives. When they move over to the conservatives are so happy to have somebody that people know and used to respect that they immediately rush to bring this person into their fold. This is why they love to have them on Fox News, and and Dave Rubin starts showing up on conservative talk radio.
So it's always the same. So you got canceled?
Yeah, I can't believe. Yeah, they're the intolerant ones. Ha ha ha. And they bring them on. The same. Yeah, they all do this come to Jesus, the road to Damascus thing. And then what does conservatism do? It sprints as quickly as it can to the left to bring these people on board because it thinks by acquiring more of these people, it's going to gain a purchase in the culture. But that's not what happens. What happens is the ruling class continues to move further to the left. The agenda keeps moving that direction. It just keeps discarding the people who happen to be suckers like Dave Rubin and actually believe in free speech or these kind of things. Like they just discard people who actually bought into this ideology, and then they end up shifting everything leftward.
But what creates kind of a mess here is because then the left kind of loses these thoughts, right? Like ultimately, if people on the left have different views or their views change or they push back, it should, in theory, change the way that the left operates and thinks, right? But instead what happens is they get pushed out, then the conservatives sort of embrace them. So those people now become kind of conservative, and then the left moves further to the left.
But what you said, Catherine, is, and then I want to get Carl's bad, is interesting because, and Auron, you talk about this in your videos too. I think the problem is that we're viewing the output of ideas itself, the way that like, you know, like in a very meme language, like the way Dave Rubin talks about the marketplace of ideas, it's like, the problem is that I feel that people view ideas not as something that is operationalized and ultimately serves a sort of utilitarian end, but or I would say like a property. And this is coming from someone, and I know it's like I can't even mention his name now because everyone hates him now. But as a Foucauldian, power is something that operates at the site of it, at its operation, and so the problem is that people view it as a commodity that you can like sort of a zero sum, like real, like hard industry commodity, like steel, for instance, where you could like use it and you could like bring it. And it's like our side has these ideas that we can sort of grab and take. And when we lose, when we lose those people, we're losing those ideas. To me, that is very well intentioned, Catherine, but I feel that they've discovered they don't really need people who have these very like nuanced and alternative ways of looking at things. They did at a point when they were ostensibly like a countercultural vanguard, but as sort of power gets solidified within one sort of train of thinking, they slough off any like alternative. But and they really don't need like people like Glenn Greenwald or the Red Scare Girls. They can have all the brilliant ideas. Or I don't know who's an intellectual that got canceled. I know a few of like the smaller ones, like oh god. Well, there's a lot of European ones.
Well, Gio, I was talking to someone recently.
Yeah.
I've had a conversation with a journalist who is probably far, you know, she's a little bit more on the, she's not conservative, but she's very outspoken, and there is like a worry, right, about getting fired, right? A very real worry. But the problem is it's not so easy to go, hey, I'll go work at, you know, Fox or whatever, you know, because that doesn't really fit in with the ideology of the human being. And so what happens is it becomes really difficult, I think, also for people to speak, because if you're conservative and you speak, you still have your, you know, your group of people. But if you're on the left and you speak, that's it, right? You lose, because you don't want to go to the right because that doesn't necessarily fit your
the Outlaw Mud Show of the media. Another wrestling term. It's the Outlaw Mud Show to go on Fox News from, I don't know, CNN or somewhere.
Well, like I mean, I can't go work for Fox. Like that wouldn't be the right thing. It doesn't quite align. And so,
but you'd also have to conform to like other like certain. Yeah,
you do. And that's the problem, is like, okay, some of it I maybe naturally conform because it fits in with my worldview, but some things don't. And then you become sort of silenced when they don't, because you know, you either, if you're going to speak out about it, you're going to find yourself in a pickle. And if, as I well know at this point, or, you know, or you don't speak up about it. And I think most of the time that's what happens, because you sort of don't have options if you generally align with one worldview.
Yeah, and Carl's bad. You had a point. And then I want to say this comment from Monetizing Leftism, who always brings the fire in the chat.
Yeah, I read it. I agree. Monetizing Leftism is on point, I have to say. But what exactly do you want me to...
You were saying something about before about the media and James O'Keefe, and you wanted to say something?
Well, yeah, okay. Actually, I want to ask a question for Auron.
Go ahead. Yeah.
This is regarding Moldbug. He said earlier that his predictions have been vindicated. I would like to ask which ones, because let me say, first of all, Moldbug, one of his primary theses is that leftism, its ultimate cause is a kind of it's insecure power. Like there's a leakage of political power. Sovereignty is being partitioned among various institutions, and that the false opposition, the outer party, that is said in the American context, the GOP, by serving as this like ceremonial fake opposition, they end up creating this impression on part of the left that they are in fact the underdog, when in reality they are the hegemonic elite. But what's happened of the past 5 or so years is that, as a matter of fact, left-wing power has become ever more, like, in a way, centralized, ever more pervasive, ever more, you might say, formalized. And yet, despite all this, they, far from this formalization, however imperfect, of power, creating, let's say, I don't know, lowering their time preference to make them like better rulers, it has only made them even more hysterical and fanatical. So to me, this whole materialist view of power is just plain wrong. But what exactly do you think that he got right, in your opinion, regarding predictions?
Well, so a lot of that analysis of the way of divided sovereignty and what that does, a lot of that is kind of also coming, I think, off of from the kind of the chain of Machiavelli to Plato to Burnham, talking about you're kind of your lions and your foxes, right? And your lions are going to, Plato calls them essences or residues, sorry, but whichever terminology you want to use. As your society becomes more ruled by cunning than force, as it becomes more ruled by kind of your crafty elites that are looking to mix ideas and create new ideas, as opposed to as opposed to your more patriotic and your more military minded leadership, you're going to start to see power become insecure, right? And one of the things that we've done with power, by trying to spread it out, trying to use popular sovereignty, that the kind of thing, has created a very insecure environment for power. They have to pretend that power works in a way that it doesn't. You have to layer a lot of myths about power on top of each other to kind of keep the foxes in power, because they can't wield kind of force in the way that lions do. And so they need to be clever. They need to use subterfuge. They need to use they need to basically lie to the people in order to kind of keep them under the thumb of people who would not naturally necessarily rise to leadership in a more traditional society. And so because of that, he says when power does get exercised, it's going to get exercised more sloppily, more haphazardly, more brutally in many ways, because they don't understand how to use it. I think that's what we're seeing. In many ways, you're right. Like the power has consolidated. That has not calmed the left down. That has only fed much of their craziness. But we have to understand the way in which that power has been consolidated. It's been consolidated by the left capturing still very many decentralized institutions that feed into our cultural and political reality. And so I don't think that we have the left having more formal power in the sense that they have changed many of the direct rules. I think it feels that way because corporations and other entities are more willing to kind of be forward with their social justice regulations and that kind of thing. They have a bigger impact on culture than they used to, or at least more evident one than they used to. But I think we also see that power is used sloppily. Look at the lockdowns. Look at the way that that force is being applied by the government on people. It's very clumsy. It doesn't make sense. It's not well thought out. It's not being exercised in a confident way. Yes, they feel more powerful than they ever have before, but at the same time, it doesn't seem like they understand how to wield it. And I do think that there was a lot of that was true. I don't think that centralizing the power in and of itself and formalizing it just immediately fixes the problem, but I do think that the way power has the power of the left has increased is not directly in a bunch of changes to the Constitution, right? We didn't get a constitutional amendment making the left the de facto mono party, the Democrats the de facto mono party of the United States. That's not what happened. A bunch of informal institutions became completely captured and were able to exercise their power more obviously in public. You could say that's a form of formalization, but it really isn't in law. Only in the way that things are how our culture is operating and feeling that kind of decentralized power being put onto society.
Well, you could argue that civil rights laws actually are a kind of formalization in favor of the left. But no, actually, my problem, yes, with this a very material view of power, effectively, seeing this kind of yes, brutalizing use of authority as some kind of administrative inefficiency, I really don't think that cuts it. It's really fundamentally, it's about dogmas and ideology. If you formalized power and centralized it in the American context, the only thing that would happen is you'd get the USSR, basically. So yeah, I think there's something quite very almost technocratic and wonkish about this view of power. I don't think that's more of an accidental property than what's going on essentially, in my opinion.
Well, I think here's an image I wanted to share real quick. So this one is from the great Tim Dillon. He says over here, wait, what? So this is, I believe, in Los Angeles, this seat closed. And people have been commenting on how this piece of paper is actually much comfier to sit on than this netting that the bench has.
Well, I wanted to pose kind of a question in terms of how do we think the institutions were captured? Because especially, or more so, the corporations, because corporations are not inherently, they're really set up to make money and whatever makes them money. And I had a conversation about this yesterday on another forum, but the way that I see it, corporations, they market things, right? And so they do that by selling something like a dream, an idea. They don't sell a product, they sell some kind of a vision. And so how, it seems like to me that they moved from selling, from selling a dream of like, if you buy this, you will feel this way. If you buy this, you'll be really cool, you'll be really hot, whatever that is, to if you buy this, you are not racist. If you buy this, you are, supporting diversity. And so it becomes that. So how did that transition happen? Because I really wonder.
With regards to corporations, the answer is actually very simple. It's ultimately down to two things. First of all, you need to get rid of this entire historical materialist Marxist idea that the economy drives society, which is nonsense. Basically, on the one hand, you have civil rights and non-discrimination laws, affirmative action, and all these other programs, which make it an actual legal liability for corporations to go against any kind of racial equalitarian view.
For more info, see Christopher Caldwell's Age of Enlightenment. Entitlement. I just want to throw that out.
Caldwell's good. Yeah, I haven't read Caldwell directly, but I'm from other sources. That's the one thing, and the other thing is, of course, mass immigration creating total demographic displacement. So when you get these two powers, effectively legal compulsion from civil rights plus demographic annihilation, the outcome is not surprising in the least.
But when you're talking about civil rights and things like that, first of all, I mean, I would really separate the idea of affirmative action from say equality of opportunity, which is quite a different thing, and don't discriminate, as in you can't not hire someone based on their race or gender or sexual orientation.
Well, but the thing about these statutes is the way they were implemented through court cases in the 70s and 80s. What ended up happening is that many of the old labor unions in America, they worked on the basis of seniority clauses, which, of course, given that men were the bulk of the workforce, these ended up de facto, you might say, privileging men. Now, with about the 60s and 70s, when the entire middle-class feminist movement of Gloria Steinem, all these people begin to challenge these things in court, the ultimate
CIA Steinem, as Alex says.
She's a spook. But the ultimate outcome was to effectively destroy the possibility of unions to restrict the labor supply and therefore push up wages. And you have many such cases, basically. These civil rights laws, they acted as a kind of destabilizing force among the labor movement. Another example is that before civil rights, in various states, you had these kind of restrictive labor statutes. For example, women were not allowed to work night shifts. They were not allowed to carry heavy loads. These very obvious things from a perspective of someone.
Sexism sounded great for back in the day.
Biological sex is real, folks. Can you believe it? But these things were abolished because of feminist activism. And ultimately, the civil rights movement directly interferes with, I'm not into class politics at all. I regard it to be total nonsense, but in a way it objectively did. So yeah.
So what you're saying is that this was a catch-22 then, where
Yeah, it absolutely
even,
was.
Yeah.
So even if originally the intentions were good, as far as there were bad things happening where you wouldn't allow certain people to, let's say, go into your hotel, your place of business, and in a way, I think a lot of that has fomented, you could say, an enemy class, for lack of a better term,
Well,
among a lot of the...
we've went from you
yeah.
couldn't go into a hotel to like your community is now entirely operated by Korean shopkeepers. That's basically what's happened
See,
in terms of like blacks.
To me, it seems like one of the biggest things though that has changed is like, because there is still a leap between, okay, you can't discriminate against people for going into your shop or your hotel, to you have to hire this many people who are of this particular race, right? That's a big leap, and I think that's not a leap that's it seems like a fairly recent leap.
But I think also an observation.
It's not really a great leap at all. I mean, the two were basically co-determinate. I mean, the kinds of it started all the way back in like the 80s. Like you had this like movement among public employers. I forgot the exact name, but
wait, which 80s? 1880s, 1980s?
1980s.
Okay,
Well, we're not sure what Carlsbad when it got.
Yeah.
But before this question gets too far away from us, not to disagree with
That was
Carlsbad,
a good joke, I must admit. That was.
I think a lot of I think there's a lot of truth in some of the things he said there. So I'm not here to disagree with the points he made on that one. But to answer Catherine's original question was how these corporations kind of got woke, right? Like how these corporations transitioned in this direction when then that wasn't their original intent. What does every person being hired by a major corporation need that they didn't need 30 years ago? What is every person
capital?
To get?
No, you always need social capital.
What do you need to get in the door to get a basic interview? What's the basic qualifier?
You're talking about education system?
Yeah, you need a university degree, right? And if you need every person who's going to go into a corporation, especially if you're going to manage, if you're going to be part of the professional managerial class, what do you need? More education, additional education, higher education, probably in more elite universities. Who rises to the top in all of these companies? Who's the people who are managing all of these departments? Well, they're all people who have spent a lot amount of time. Sorry, sorry.
Well, the chat seems to think it's never mind. That,
but,
as soon as you ask, go ahead.
I kind of agree with the direction you're going in, Auron. I've been thinking about this a lot because to me, regardless of where you sit on the political spectrum, and we probably sit in slightly opposing areas, but I think the most important thing is for people to be able to challenge ideas, think for themselves, and not to be taught specific ideas. And I know, because I know somebody's close to me who's currently studying to be a teacher, like the sort of ideology is 100% at this point embedded, right? They're being taught very specific values as opposed to kind of thinking for themselves and maybe, teaching empathy as opposed to teaching this is what you should think, and not asking the questions. And you're right. I think the biggest thing is, and I know universities are a really, really big source of this, but so are high schools and probably even middle schools. And I think if you wanted to try and change what's going on right now, I think you really have to go to these places first.
Well, here's the rough thing. I think you're right. I think that is a big part of it. I think but here's the thing. People are going to be taught what to think no matter what. Here's the truth. We never escape churches. Everybody goes to a church. Maybe your church is a university. Maybe your church is HBO. Maybe your church is a cathedral. But everybody gets their ideas from the people who are in power, the people who are above them, the people who have authority, the people who manage the traditions and knowledge of their culture. The reason that everybody is moving left, the reason that your corporations are going to woke, is they all went to the same church. They all went to university. And so they all use the values and ideas that they share in common. That's how humans work. That's how cultures really
Universities work quite different. Like I know when I went to school, yes, I mean, being if I wanted to be provocative, I did tell people certain things intentionally to be provocative, even though they weren't even necessarily true. And people get a little bit upset, but you could still have that conversation, that discussion. You wouldn't be quote unquote canceled. Nowadays, it has shifted so dramatically, and also inherently. When I went to high school, I don't remember being taught a lot of ideology per se, and now it's literally part of the curriculum. So how did that happen?
But fish don't know they're wet, right? It doesn't feel like ideology because it's huh? It doesn't feel like ideology when it's your core belief system, right? It doesn't feel. Anybody who has traveled, anybody who has truly been in a different culture knows how desperately those things change, how different they can be. We have been told that there's this neutral marketplace of ideas, and that's what universities should be, that you go in and you have this discussion and the best ideas come out and they win and you think for yourself. That's not how people work. People absorb the ideas of those around them, the culture around them. Everybody knows this. Your mom told you when you were 7 years old, right? Your friends matter, right? The people around you matter. The things you watch on TV matter. And it sounds old and it sounds stuck in the mud, or it sounds obvious and something your grandma would say. Your grandma was right. Like, those things shape who you are and what you believe. Nobody is really above this. We like to think we are, but we aren't. And the idea that we are is dangerous. And the idea that we can have this neutral space that's just not going to be influenced is never going to be real. And so the only thing that happens is when you pretend there's a neutral space, people fill the void. People come in and fill that void with ideology. And that's what we're feeling now, is that the ideology that filled the void in these theoretically neutral institutions just feels more alien than it ever did before. But
wouldn't that also drive people, young people especially, towards a counterculture if they're seeing the overall dominant culture being one type? Wouldn't they then go to the opposite type?
I think this is largely a mistake of understanding how humans work. A lot of people will say things like, you hit middle school or you hit high school and you become rebellious. No, you don't. You become wildly conformist. You just notice other hierarchies. You just stop living.
So you're conformist to your circle of hierarchies as opposed to the circle of hierarchies that would be, let's say, the school and the principal and so on.
You grew up with your family. When you spent most of your time with your family, when your brothers and sisters were your closest friends, when your parents were the ones that influenced you the most, that was your hierarchy. They're the people you please. The minute you get a little older, you start realizing that there are going to be people in your life outside of your family that are going to be just as important. You have to start caring about what girls or boys think. You have to start care about what your friends and the people that hang around with think. And all of a sudden, this phenomenon we think of teenage rebellion is really teenagers just trying to figure out which hierarchy they're supposed to actually prioritize.
So,
they're trying to figure out.
Why do you
people have faith in the state religion? Simple as. I mean, I really hate this kind of take that all people don't actually believe in wokeness. They're just signaling.
Well, I was going to ask.
That really drives me nuts. They do believe it, of course. This is the official state religion.
Yeah,
of course,
they do. Sure.
Well, it depends, but it also depends on who, and it depends on their financial situation.
Well, no,
For
but
example,
this came up.
Real quick. I just wanted to bring up the example of the people on the Upper West Side of New York City when they had the homeless people who were encamped there, thanks to Mayor de Blasio. Very quickly, all those rich people started suing the city because they may say, may say one thing, but at the end of the day, they know fair well. So again, when you're talking about these,
they put
people
up
who
those spikes on the.
I was calling you out, Miss Plotnik.
Yes. So like when we're
people think different. Okay, but for example, me and you could go to the same school and still come out with different thoughts. And you could say, oh, it's because our families are different or our friends are different, but we might even have the same circle of friends. Like, I think quite differently than a lot of the people that are in my circle. Do I ever conform to their opinions just to kind of fit in and not stir the pot? Yes, because it can be a little bit uncomfortable. But do I think privately the way that I do? And yes. right? And I might have a very similar background to someone else, and we might think completely differently about things. So I don't want to take completely the agency of the individual out of this and give it all over to, like, that community.
No, it's not hard determinism, but it's understanding. Let me put it this way. How many people do you know who went to college and became more liberal than they used to be? A lot, right? Like a lot.
Honestly, I'm not sure.
My guess would be most people would describe that as their experience. How many people do you?
The before feminism, after feminism pictures.
But
I know that's kind of like 2015.
Yeah.
Anti-natalism stuff, but
how many people go to college and come out more conservative? Zero?
Well,
right?
maybe
one. Yeah.
I did. I mean, well, but yeah, I can't say that.
Let's be honest and look at the people we know, right? Like it's almost a one-way street. Like it happens, right? But there's a particular movement, and it's for a particular reason. It's because, as Carlsbad pointed out, the state religion is what is being taught. It's what's being rewarded. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm old enough to where I went to college at a time before everything went super woke. So I was able to go into philosophy classes and argue my then more conservative beliefs than most people, but less conservative than they are today beliefs. And most people were happy to just have someone to disagree with. Just the professors were still kind of happy that someone would speak up and give the opposing view. So I didn't come up in this super woke, nobody can say anything, you'll immediately get banned university. But it's still very clear what everybody believed. It wasn't hard to figure out that 90% of my professors were Marxist or heading that direction, right? Like this was not a difficult thing to figure out. It wasn't very well hidden. It wasn't that the college was some place of neutral discussion. It was very clearly pushing a particular ideology, even if it still allowed people to express views at that time that were different.
Yeah, I think that's always the distinction, though, is when it comes to the vast majority of people, there is sort of this line between sincerity and performative sincerity, but really what's the difference at the end of the day? Because when it comes to having another Sopranos come out, you guys have all the top tier positions. Like having the top tier positions in some ways entails a level of sincerity. And I think this is why I've said this for years now. People like Jordan Peterson, the dark web people, they don't realize that censorship when it comes to university, it's not as clear cut as a case like who's the girl that's fairly close to where I live, Lindsay Shepherd. It's not just like that. I mean, for every one Lindsay Shepherd that gets overtly censored, and this was the Waterloo University case, there is sort of
Waterloo. That's where the vampires hang out.
Yeah. Oh God.
You remember that video?
Yeah. But there, for every one clear-cut case of overt censorship, there's more of the informal selection pressures, I would say, that contribute to this environment, in the sense that when you cross over into the graduate level, it's an active searching for a very particular type of personality that will survive in academia. Someone who usually is, I guess you would say, I mean, if you wanted to use the meme term, like, small-souled bugman, blah, blah, blah. Someone who has a high level of deference and openness, but also a sort of a weak enough will to conform to a narrative, and someone who is very apt at incredible amounts of specialization that has murdered the spirit of intertextual, interdisciplinary, what would you call it, holism within them. So that's like this, so censorship isn't very, like, of course you can have like, and then Google manipulates the results, which is another thing too we could talk about, where you could search like censorship in university. Of course you're going to get articles debunking that claim, because it's very difficult to actually have a clear-cut example of, yes, censorship is going on in this university. But what I wanted to ask you, Auron, and also Carlsbad, would be this, for a few years now, we've talked about people in these spheres, we talked about the realities and the intricacies of woke capital. Now, the response by BreadTube people, that one person in particular, what's his name? Jen, Sean and Jen, that ghoul, and this person, by the way, has tried to ruin people's lives. I don't use, well, I kind of do use the term ghoul too often, but so this person says that one of the what did he say? I'm probably misgendering him, because in BreadTube, the only way you could survive as a white male, heterosexual white male, is if you claim that you're non-binary.
It's to not be one anymore. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And again, another insight by the distributist. What did he say? That a foible of the conservatives is that they claim that capitalism is driving social change, when in reality it's almost like this weird return to like 2012 Andrew Breitbart, politics is downstream from culture, and therefore corporations are opportunistically and cynically just trying to make a buck by like adopting, I mean, wokeness. I mean, people that like James Lindsay have run the term into the ground. Yeah. But let's just say progressive ideology. But yes, Carlsbad, what did you say?
He said that social change was driving woke capital as opposed to woke capital driving social change.
Yeah. And sorry, it was Wilfrid Laurier University in Waterloo, Ontario. I almost applied there, by the way, but so what do you guys make of this claim, this retort that in actuality, like, you know, corporations just want to make money, man, and that all of this is just selective pressure? I mean, it's kind of ridiculous. I mean, look at what happened. I mean, yesterday, what's the ice cream company? Ben and Jerry's, where they were, well, you guys get into it. Yeah.
I mean, the fact that corporations ever since at least the 90s have had like all these like socially responsible investing outfits, that, you know, there are large contributions to various NGOs and charities. This pretty much proves the point that no, they're not like purely profit motivated. They never have been. Like the whole trope of like pure profit maximization, that's a very simplifying assumption of neoclassical economics. Like real corporations, you know, they have multiple ends. Actually, they don't have like of course, in a way, profit is you might say the final end. But in between that, you know, there's like multiple heterogeneous ones that like are practiced on the way to get there. So like they're not like pure profit maximizers, obviously.
Yeah.
But what would you say to the counterpoint that a lot of these, let's say, people who are higher up, kind of like I was talking about the Upper West Side people, that there may be a case of lightly subverting the subverters or infiltrating them to such an extent that the let's say wildest elements could at least be controlled? Because I still think that there may be an incentive for people at the top to maintain some kind of peace. A good example would be, let's say, England in the beginning of the 20th.
But the burgers.
Yes. Well, let's say like England in the beginning of the 20th century, where there was a real threat of communism. So what did they do? A lot of them, they ended up subverting, infiltrating a lot of these organizations, and they were, they had to create a lot of these social programs, a lot of these labor unions to make sure that England wouldn't fall to communism. So the people in the top, at the very top, had to get involved with that kind of subversion. So the question here is, how much of what we're seeing right now is just some people going with the flow, making sure that a lot of these, let's say, very extreme things would be managed and would be controlled? And not to say that there aren't true believers among people within those higher ranks as well, but I still think that there are practical people out there who say, you know what, at least we can control this, at least we can maneuver this in such a direction as it's going to cause the least amount of harm.
Well,
for example, I'll just give you one quick example, and then I'm going to let you go for it. The example, I guess, would be when you look at David Hogg and Emma Gonzalez and that whole gun thing, that whole protest. Because to me, and I could be wrong, but what that signifies, yes, but what that signified to me was almost like the elite saying, you know what, let's put on a show for the baby. Hey, baby, here's your rattle, and then the baby calms down, where the protest would be the rattling for the baby. Like, I don't know, would this be a correct take on that or no?
I don't give a damn what actors are doing, and I don't know. But
no, I'm not talking about actors. I'm not talking about actors. I'm specifically talking about organizing an anti-gun protest that at the end of the day didn't really accomplish anything. That's what I mean by shaking the rattle for the baby. Like, here, I'm shaking the rattle. It's like, oh, we're gonna have all these changes, and we're gonna get rid of all the guns, all these beautiful visuals. Nothing happens at the end of the day. So to me, that signifies that there may be people with common sense that can subvert movements, control them in such a way as to give baby his bottle so that the baby calms down and then move on with life.
Well, there's no evidence this is actually happening. On the contrary, we only see like further and further like radicalization and pretty much the entrenchment of the desired social ends of the left. Like you're trying to say like maybe there's something like the
or
yeah,
like Nancy Pelosi wearing the African suit,
like the but
pandering.
That's not pandering. Like she does believe it, but you think she doesn't? You're talking like the kind of like British new liberalism of like the early 20th century, where it's like you have to like create this like co-optation of like social democracy, in a way to like
co-opting. That's the right word. Not
it's
co-opting.
Fabian, and it's very from a
welfare capitalism against the communism. There's no evidence this is happening. Rather, the way I would describe what's going on is like in the same way that some Christians, they're very devout. Some Catholics, they attend mass every day. They practice frequent communion. They pray novenas. They have all sorts of devotions, and others are lapsed. They only fulfill their Sunday obligation.
They're timing. It's like when they get confirmed, married, and then die. That's when they go to the church.
But they're still Catholic. They're still in a sense on board. Like they're not outside of it. They're not really they're not co-opting at all, because they're not even like really participating. They're rather passive in this whole thing. It's not for them to be like co-opting it to try like steer it in a more moderate direction. They'd be like, grasping the netto, but that's not what they're doing at all. They're passively reacting.
But then AOC would still be at the fence. AOC would still be crying at the fence, and she's not doing that anymore. So to me, that means that there is a good level of cynicism going on with a lot of these people, where they just want to be in charge and they want to manage things.
Yeah, but she can cry at the fence, but now she doesn't need to, because ostensibly, I hate to say this, I mean, it's such a black pill for if you're someone on the right, but demographically, America is fucked. I mean, come on, let's face it.
Wait, are you talking about the whole like cages thing here?
Yeah.
Oh, I mean, no, obviously like no, this isn't really opportunism at all. Like people are going to have double standards against their political enemies. That's perfectly
or here's
natural.
an example with Cuomo.
Now
nobody's talking about Cuomo anymore, right? Like Cuomo's kind of there was this big brouhaha about look at how horrible Cuomo is. Now everybody shut up about him because some bills ended up passing that they wanted to pass. So it was a purely political thing. Now it's gone. Now everybody moves on. So I don't see a lot of true believers here. I see political opportunists much more than true believers.
No, but they are true believers to the extent that
like in the Cuomo during the first year, he was a celebrity. Like people were despite
they said he saved lives.
Despite New York being the disaster with sending all of the hospital patients into nursing homes, like seeding all of these nursing homes and killing all these invasive ventilations that ended up killing people gratuitously. He was praised as being some kind of amazing leader. And then they turned against him, but wasn't there a Me Too thing going on?
Oh, where he grabbed, but that's just what us Italians do.
But now it's all gone. That's what I'm getting at. And sure,
but the Me Too thing
that's all burned out. You could say that people are tired, fine. But I'm sorry, when I look at Nancy Pelosi with that little African hat on, I don't take it seriously. The whole thing just looks like a farce.
The point they're trying to make is that you don't take it seriously. Most sane people don't. But
I don't
the
think
right
she
people
takes it seriously. I don't think she takes it seriously.
The fact that she has to signal it at all.
Exactly. Fact
that she has to even do it at all. Why?
Well, that's the baby bottling or whatever you want to call it. That's the rattle shaking that I'm describing
let's
here.
Let's go Catherine, then Auron.
Yeah, I just have a question. Do you think that the number of insane people is as big as it might appear?
You mean Oh, you mean like no? I haven't like looked at statistics directly, but from what I know, like mental health is like deteriorating rapidly, which is a big fucking surprise, right?
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
and also, but people also report mental health higher. But what I'm talking about, not that kind of sanity. I'm talking about,
Ideological excesses, you mean?
yeah, where people are like, because when I started to speak more openly with people, what I realized, most people are a lot more moderate and reasonable than it might appear. But we might have this wrong impression in our society that people are this extreme, when it might in fact just be a minority that we're kind of terrified of.
Well, no, I mean, when you interact with people on like a personal one-on-one basis, they're always gonna be more moderate than when you interact like on a political basis. Like there's a like with a private interaction, having private enemies is one thing, and having political enemies is quite another. These are two different things.
I can even give an example with, let's say, younger people. We had Calth Respector, the great Remus Calth Respector on, many times great friend of the show. He's going to be back for the art stream, by the way, with Zero HP Lovecraft. I just want to promote that real quick. Don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel, the Left Stream. But anyway, he was saying how when he went into VR chat and he put on a ferret costume, they have the VR avatar, so he was like a little ferret guy. And he mentioned how it's easier for people to speak with like little helpless looking animals than like big avatars. But anyway, he said that the information that he got from a lot of like these Zoomers is that when they're publicly on Twitter, they have to have a certain kind of persona, certain kind of ideas in order to not be castigated by the rest of the group. And it's not the same when they're actually speaking, like you said, face to face. And I think that there is a lot of fear that peer pressure that drives a lot of this stuff. And the question is, like, how do we break it? Is it possible to break something that strong with young people? Everybody has the hashtags. Everybody has the pronouns. It's just, it seems very militaristic.
I think social media allows the mob mentality to rule the day much more. And I think maybe that is why we're seeing some of these things. Like I didn't used to blame social media, but the more I think about it, the more I think that's a really big part of it, is because we're speaking in mobs. There's pylons, as I mentioned to you, Lev. I mean, these things just do not, don't just happen like that, right? Without that platform. And I think that might have been something that quite strongly influenced the culture that we're in right now.
I mean, yeah, because if you go back to the old 19th century liberal idea of the public sphere, I mean, it was a fairly like exclusive and elitist one. Like basically it encompassed, being a journalist or like a writer in those days, like there was an actual like barrier to entry, like in terms of like literacy, leisure time, and all sorts of things. Social media, if it's like completely leveling, unfettered, equalized mass communication on a completely planetary scale, it obliterates any kind of boundary whatsoever. It liquefies it. So this ends up creating the whole chaos in action. It is a big part of it. Although, I mean, honestly, we should probably go back to like 80s era computing, have like a bunch of Unix mainframes and use Usenet and that kind of thing.
You have to have extra chromosomes to be on the
internet. Eternal September, man, it was a big mistake,
But Auron, what is your assessment to like this retort that a lot of these people, like, for example, on YouTube, a lot of the like early alt-right people got totally destroyed and deplatformed, and I'm actually surprised that some of the alt-right people are still on, but they got taken out. But as much as on the show, like I've criticized the alt-right, is one thing you could say is that yes, it was an organic sort of upsurge or movement, but at the same time you have breadtube rolling and people like Sean and Jen. That
did you say breadtube rolling like a bread roll? Anyway, go on.
Yeah, like a bread roll, but breadtube rolling. Keep rolling. You have people that are getting profiles in the New York Times saying that they're de-radicalizing people, and so it's a totally different thing. And they'll probably never get banned until like certain strategic things start happening. So you have people like that. They're sort of hand waving this, saying that it's just corporations acting for profit margins and, politics is downstream of culture. So what would you say to those people, or Auron? What is your take on this conversation in general?
I think Carlsbad was largely right. You have who cares, right? Like, who cares what their genuine motives are? By simply having to capitulate to the ideology, what won, right? You know what actually governs the conversation. There's a reason that BreadTube can make 1,000 videos claiming whatever they want, and they'll never have to worry about being demonetized or banned. It's because power agrees with them. They agree with power. I'm sure they don't see themselves that way, but it's very simple. The people who are being panned are the ones that power disagrees with. You don't have to be a rocket surgeon to figure that out. And so I think that it's very clear that whether more cynical politicians are using the trappings of social justice, or more cynical CEOs are doing it in order to further their individual power or their ability to make money. Sure, great. But that's true of any culture, right? That's true of any religious belief. That's true of any set of values. People are always going to want power inside those systems, and they're always going to use whatever the predominant prevailing ideology is to move that forward. That doesn't mean that those systems aren't the ones that are in power. In fact, that probably means they are. If those corporations have to kowtow to that, if they have to signal in that direction, if those politicians have to play those games, then it's very clear who holds the power. Nobody is kowtowing to the Christian right anymore, right? Like, who does that? Even the GOP.
Yeah.
Spends more time, kowtowing to basically everyone but the Christian right.
Well, they're getting rid of all the Trump people, and I mean, look what happened with Arkansas. I mean, even the fact that we're talking about trans children now, and how it's like it's a signaling thing.
Well, I mean, does the Christian right even exist in any real sense? I mean,
it's a fair point.
Yeah. The Southern Baptists, they cucked a few years ago. Like, remember, like they denounced.
I keep seeing those TikTok videos with the dancing preachers in the rainbow attire.
I think people that was another thing. People say that they got culturally dominated and they got placed out of the market. But I think what another overlooked aspect, and this is something that is probably someone who's written about, probably paleocons. I think Pat Buchanan sort of alluded to this, is that when you look at the religious right and how they fell, you could really see that. Yes, in the 80s, it became a meme because you had Tipper Gore reading Slayer lyrics on the Capitol floor, right? But at the and then later Marilyn Manson coming in and so
Tipper Gore, the Tipper Gore.
Yeah, but that wasn't the Christian right even.
Right, you're talking about the Democrats, right?
Yeah. Sorry,
the wife of the vice president of Bill Clinton. Yes, that stalwart GOP conservative.
Sorry, I'm thinking of the commission where they got D. Snyder from
Twisted Sister,
Twisted Sister, and he was had the crumpled up paper.
Remember, John Denver was the star witness in that. Anyway.
Oh yes, that's right. John Denver. Yeah. That's
so. Here's the thing to remember about this. So as much as we like to make fun of these things, and they do feel cartoonish because they've been made to feel cartoonish, right? Every one of these people was right. Right. The slippery slope has 1,000% win percentage on this, right? McCarthy was correct. The government was full of communists. Hollywood was full of communists.
It's when McCarthy went after certain people in the military establishment and so forth.
Man, if giving up heavy metal would get rid of wokeness, I would do it in a heartbeat.
No.
Yeah.
I love my Iron Maiden, man. I've got all the records.
Iron Maiden ain't worth it, man. Ain't worth it.
But they're not worth the collapse of civilization.
No.
I truly believe that new metal revival will solve a lot of this. But
are you kidding?
Would there be something?
I'm sorry, I have to leave now. My bad. No.
Oh no! No, but I had a point about this. Sorry, Lev, to cut you off. My point was that. When you look at the religious right, a thing that's overlooked, but some people kind of allude to, like Pat Buchanan. My thesis is that they did it to themselves to the extent that in the 80s, the conservatives had a choice. You had Now, I think like people like my good friend Paul Talk, who insulted me recently because I said that I like Anselm Kiefer, but he said like people blame Strauss and they say that he's a neocon and all that stuff. What I think is that when it came in the 80s, you had predominantly neoliberalism and neoconservatism, which was embodied by Ronald Reagan. And to an extent, people like, I mean, they look at, Jordan, anything that Jordan Peterson says, go and read Closing of the American Mind. Ronald Reagan had it on his nightstand. Alan Bloom, who was a Straussian, but he was a left Straussian. He wasn't like Jaffa. He certainly wasn't like Vogelin. So,
yeah, he was East Coast, I think.
Yes, he was the East Coast Straussians. So Alan Bloom, Closing the American Mind, he said, well, it's all because of Nietzsche, it's because of perspectivism, it's because of these lefties, blah, 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 all that bullshit. So what happened was in the 80s, the conservative movement had a choice. It had the Paleocons, which is somewhat kind of like a little bit racialized, a little bit Vogelin, Gottfried, Pat Buchanan. So they had that, or they had protectionism and nationalism on one side, and you had like neoliberalism. Now, the reason that the evangelicals got into this, in my opinion, and this comes from an unlikely source. This comes from Jim Bakker. Okay, Jim Bakker, when he got out of prison, he wrote this book about the prosperity gospel. And what happened was a lot of the evangelicals, they capitulated to the prosperity gospel, where they thought that rootless capitalism was going to deliver them to Zion. And so therefore they basically forfeited their social clout in favor of economic and market clout. And then you have these mega churches. And then eventually you have Joel Osteen and T.D. Jakes. And so my thesis is that the prosperity gospel, capitalism basically spit roasted the evangelicals.
I mean, it was based on a kind of a theological understanding of Bolshevism as the ultimate godlessness, which wasn't wrong, but by the 70s and 80s, it was kind of a pastiche almost.
Yeah,
because,
exactly. Yes.
Anyone who honestly viewed it like Sovietology in those days would have concluded that the regime was massively stagnating. Although the thing is, though, that one very interesting aspect of the Cold War was the way that the United States consistently overestimated the performance of the Soviet economy. And but this had this benefited both sides. It benefited the left because, you see, economic planning works great. We need more state control. And it also benefits, the Pentagon, the whole hawkish interventionist side, you see, because, the Soviet juggernaut is gonna, it's mass mobilizing.
They got rockets in space.
We gotta catch up and do the same here. We need more mass mobilization. We need more a spending on a dumb military blueprints that will never actually be built. Stuff like that.
And we honor the brave soldiers in Afghanistan and Mujahideen. So, Rambo's gonna go and help the Mujahideen. So
as far as something like liberalism goes, since I see a lot of besmirching of liberalism within more reactionary thought, my question to you, gentlemen and ladies, is: do you think that it needs to be that you need to throw out the baby with the bathwater in this case? Because like we were talking about before with these various civil rights movements, they did much more than what people wanted them to do as far as adding all these extra things in. Would it not be possible to retain the baby and not throw the baby out with the bathwater when it comes to liberalism, when it comes to just meritocracy, having the best people come in and do something and not exclude people based on where they came from? Is that not a possibility? And the second thing that I would also add in there is, do you agree that we do move through certain eras where in the 1920s, for example, a lot of women dropped out of, polite society? You could say they started boozing it up. They started going to jazz clubs, and you could see a similar thing going on in the late 60s. But then we had the 30s where it calmed down, and then we had the 80s where it also calmed down. So do we not see certain wave patterns happening here? And can we perhaps say that this is a swinging of the pendulum right now to an extreme end, and it's going to calm down?
I think the swing of the pendulum is a bit of an illusion. I think we've moved steadily to the left, always slowly. Often the ratchet will stop and it will feel more conservative for a while. But every time the ratchet gets reapplied, we don't go further right, we go further left. I think that process is going to continue probably until something breaks pretty fundamentally. I don't think that most of the people, including myself, I'm as victim into this as much as anybody else, who grew up in a liberal society can completely divorce themselves from the ethos. I don't know if we're really able to completely escape it. I think until the system and the ideas that undergird it prove to be completely unmanageable and collapse, I don't think people will really be able to abandon it. They might be able
when
to.
You're talking about, oh, sorry, go on.
They might be able to stop some of its excesses for a time to extend the lifetime of the system, but I don't think they'll really ever abandon the system until it falls apart.
Well, when you're talking about abandoning the system, are you talking about abandoning principles of liberalism? Because would it mean that the only way forward would be to reinstitute all of these things that, kept somebody who otherwise would have wanted to contribute to some, some group of people, like, what you're saying that kind of stuff would also have to go the way of the dodo, and there's no way to actually retain a lot of the good things. Well, I guess you could say, well, what defines good? Well, a lot of the things that, let's say, would make sure that there would be more of a meritocracy and people would not be excluded.
But Auron has whole videos about this concept of meritocracy.
I do, yeah. I do have videos discussing whether or not meritocracy is in itself actually good. And I think that's the thing. Like I said, again, even as I say that, it pains me, right? Like, even as I say that, something about me goes, no, of course it is. Like, it's the core of who we are. It's what we are. It's
the image of thought.
Yeah, exactly. And I don't know if we can ever escape that until the patterns prove themselves to just not be to not able to operate anymore. I think we're gonna follow this one right off the cliff. I know that's not a very helpful
so
thing.
what you're saying then is that it is an axiom that with liberalism, all of this other stuff that we don't really like, and I understand that you have your things against meritocracy, but just like in general, like really simply, all these things that we don't like with this woke culture, whatever you want to call it, what you're saying is that it's always going to be an outgrowth of liberalism, and there's nothing that can be done about that. That's just the way the cookie crumbles.
Well, so this is always the go back to the 90s thing, right? Like, if we could just dial liberalism back, if we can just dial it back,
it's
right?
The Bill Maher, why can't we just talk to each other?
Which is funny, because these are always the people who are making fun of conservatives for wanting to go back to the 50s, right? Like, they have exactly the same plan to fix society. They just want to reboot from a slightly later save, right? And so
why can't I tell sex jokes anymore?
yeah, exactly. And so, can we keep these good things about liberalism? I don't know. I don't know that many of the things that are the fruits of liberalism can survive without a system that is moving that direction. I think that inevitably most of the things that you think that are good about liberalism will push things ultimately in the direction that we're going. Do I think that we can make some significant changes to turn that around? Honestly, I don't think that, as our society stands right now, I don't think most people are capable of that. I don't think it will. I think that we will just probably continue along that path until enough people see the consequences as being too costly.
But I think also another point would be, when we talk about woke capital, the intricacies and the sort of the excesses and the externalities that happen when you wed a certain ideological image of thought, which is image of thought being the way you think about how thinking is done. So the way you even think about something, as Deleuze said, is the way that you are structured by the assumption. So he uses the example, in Plato, it's just a given that the form of the good is the ultimate form. Why is the good the form of the good, right? So why is that at the capstone? So the way to think about this, when you sort of wed a certain degree of liberal progressive ideology, and I do say liberal because, let's face it, everyone's a radical liberal now. The Marxist professor, he's a radical liberal. So when you wed it to the engine of capital, what you're saying is that you're wedding it to the sort of the formalities of the way market incentives work, and also the way that capitalism has unique ability to take up what is by necessity or by nature, something that is driven from a lot of different factors that have happened in society up until now. So we've structured the economy in such a way because it quote unquote works. Because why? Because market structures all the way back to, Smith, Ricardo, and so forth, sets up because of these joint stock corporations, blah blah blah. You all get this, right? So the free market, whatever. It's not really free, but we call it that.
Why do you call
We're
it
walking into accelerationism?
Yeah,
exactly.
Right? Exactly.
But why do you call it a liberal? Like when you say radical liberal, what exactly? And I know this is like some Bill Maher shit, but still, why use the word liberal for something like that?
This is a good point, actually. Not Geo, finish now.
Well, what I was going to say is that radical liberalism, because it's predicated on. I know, I'm terrible. It's predicated on the assumption that autonomy at all costs must be delivered to the maximum amount of people. Now, good, so again, this is John Stuart Mill, the maximum amount of good for the maximum amount of people. What is defined as good is happiness. What is defined as happiness? It's defined as the satiation of base pleasures and other sort of market demands. How is it a market demand? Well, we've just created artificial demands, but that doesn't matter because in the end, it's like what Nietzsche said about rationality. When you take affect, when you take a concept that claims to be rational, in reality, all rationalization comes later. Rationality is a sort of not an a priori thing. It's definitely something that comes after the fact. But over time, Nietzsche said, rationality gets embedded into the concept anyways, so people can't tell the difference between what is before everything, what is reason, and what is a rationalization of something. So they say, well, this is just the natural conclusion of things. That's a rationalization. But what I'm saying is that when you wed wokeness, or I hate the fucking term because of James Lindsay, when you wed progressive liberalism, when you wed it to
Sorry.
when you wed it to the engine of capitalism, you really can't pull the brakes on it, because what you're doing is that you are crafting the human subject in such a way that is advantageous to modern capitalism. This was a great thread today by my good friend Yerk, who we should have on the show really soon. And I said this is kind of like Heideggerian in framing, meaning that he says a lot, like the James Lindsay people, they got this wrong. They think that it's like something that comes after the fact, and it's like wokeness comes after the fact, and then capitalism adopts to it. And what happens is it's a way of like it tears people apart, because we used to be a unified society, then it tore people apart. No, it's the opposite. What happens is intersectionality, wokeness, whatever you want to call it, it's a way of strategically aligning disparate groups together within a marketplace. It's a way of forming the human subject in such a way that you have a maximum amount of consumption. And so, for example, trans identity is a good one. He points to this in his thread, where he says that the whole thing is that you have these groups working together now, and they're sort of forming subjectivity around like total rootlessness, total freedom, total atomization. I create my own self. Now, how do you create your own self? You have to consume. You have to consume your identity. You have to buy these products. You have to buy the Funko Pop. And by buying the Funko Pop, you've affirmed your identity. You've bought the trans Funko Pop. So in so many words, when you implode those like ancient roots of someone as a self, religion, family, nationality, race, ethnicity, what happens is you're creating like this moldy putty that you can sort of shape. And so woke capital operates that way. It's wedding progressive liberalism to capitalism, because now everyone becomes like this like same NPC individual, this like cookie cutter character. When you have like, I don't know, some fighting game where it's like you create a custom character. So that's why James Lindsay and all those people, they got it wrong, because they it's not about pulling people together. It's about bringing everyone into this like homogenous whole that is like someone without history. And that's a big thing too. When you obliterate historical consciousness from people, then you can fill them with whatever mythology you want. It's like, what did the Enlightenment liberals do? They're like, well, the state of nature was what we said the state of nature was. And so therefore, from that notion of history, you get like human rights and social contract and all that bullshit. I mean, so sorry, I'm ranting right now, but it's very convoluted.
Queen Slay. That's all I got to say about that.
An important Oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Auron. Go ahead.
An important part of that process that you're talking about, Gio, is also understanding that one of the things that is great about progressivism is it destroys the natural community and natural family structures, which then capital gets to sell back to you, right?
Yes.
At $9.95.
You've explained what I've fucking convolutedly accelerationist my way towards. Yes.
I know where you're going. Yeah. Well, you don't have a community to talk to anymore. Well, there's a therapist who you can pay to to tell your sins to. There are all these different service providers who will give you all the things that you've lost in the disassemblement of your identity and the disillusion of your culture. And so that also feeds exactly this machine.
So Yerk is saying James Lindsay thinks IDPAW is all about the valorization of subjectivity, which is bad, over objectivity, which is good. It's much so again, this is like the Jordan Peterson Ben Shapiro, facts don't care about your feelings. We have to get back to realpolitik. It's much worse than that. It's the systematic conversion of subjectivities into objective, building blocks for social engineering projects. So these liberals like James Lindsay, like Ben Shapiro, when they tell you that, they want to basically get rid of facts, they want to get rid of science, they want to get rid of, whatever bullshit they think the free market is. They're like, it's all about feelings and subjectivity, which is a bad thing because it's postmodernist, it's perspective, it's Nietzsche, it's bad. Jordan Peterson, Nietzsche is bad because it led to postmodernism. When in actuality, no, you are affirming a even more concrete picture of a very market-driven subject. You are affirming a concrete reality. And that's where James Lindsay and all those people get it wrong. Because you're basically turning people into objects. This is Heideggerian framing. You're turning you're conquering nature to such an extent that now the human self is another object to be bought and sold among many. Now your pleasures itself. And again, if this conservatives, they don't want to read Marcuse. And yes, Marcuse, when he gets to like Eros and Civilization, he kind of goes off the rails and he becomes whatever. But what happens is you are buying into a concrete version of the self. You are consuming that identity, but it's a very now the pleasures that you seek, that is also a concrete property to buy into. Like when you buy into like a certain, I don't know, an OnlyFans that dresses up like Nala or whatever. I don't know. What's the character from, what's the love interest from Naruto? What's her name?
Sakura.
Yeah, Sakura. So when an OnlyFans girl dresses like Sakura and I don't know, it does like feet asthma or something. It's like that is a pleasure that is it's bought and sold to you by the market. But then you form your identity around, yes, I have to cosplay as Sakura and I have this particular foot fetish. So I know that's a ridiculous example, but you're turning people into objects essentially, which is ironic for these, woke people that talk about objectivization and othering.
Not just people, women. Especially, women love to objectify themselves and then like scream like "Stop objectifying me!"
Right, but speaking of dressing up as Sakura.
Oh my god, is Sakura the one with the pink hair?
Yes, it is. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, do they get together? Or is it sort of like an Ash and what's her name, Misty? Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's a similar kind of thing.
Did Ash end up with Misty?
No, he gets new girls every season. That's how.
Oh, okay. And he kind of like just discards them.
Yes, exactly. It's like throws them in the trash.
He gets Charizard to do his thing.
He reads Cartiste.
Yeah, he reads Chateau Artiste. Yes, exactly. Well, someone monetizing leftism in the chat. Yes. He said that. He said something very interesting about NRX.
There may be a left cultural momentum because culture production is cheaper, more available to plebs. But since Thatcher Reagan, the economic political center has shifted hugely to the right. What do you think of that?
Wait, Naruto wound up with her fat friend?
Yeah.
He had a fat friend?
Yeah, he had this fat friend. She always had like a crush on him. I don't
What's
know
her name?
I don't know.
I have to look this up.
Oh
my god.
Gio, you don't even watch anime. You have to watch JoJo.
Oh my God.
And everybody subscribe. All the people who are watching us subscribe. And by the way, now that I have a few moments to speak here, I just wanted to show my new Lev card. So here it is. This is my new... Oh, hold on. I actually... here. This is my new Lev card. It is called Peer Reminder. I just put it on Super Rare right now. It is currently in the auction stage. Here we go. Okay, so you could see it being animated over here. This is what it looks like. I'm going to put a higher res version into the chat as well so you can take a look at it. But anyway, peer reminder. Go get it. Invest in Lev. Hashtag invest in Lev. Invest in Lev. Anyway, I just wanted to get that out there. New Lev card. Go for it. Anyway, one thing that I wanted to bring up here, which I think is also important, is when it comes to these people who, like, let's say, Catherine, for instance, by the way, she unfortunately had to go right now, but she had a great time, and she's really thankful for doing this. But people who are in Catherine's position, who are, you know, more leaning on the side of being liberal, but have had kind of enough of a lot of this stuff, where do you perceive there to be some kind of a boiling point? Some kind of a point at which, you know what, I can't take this anymore for the majority of people? Or would you say that people are so pliable, it's not going to take long to create, like a, what was it, the Eloy and the Morlocks, you know, from the Time Machine type of situation? I don't know.
I would not expect some kind of mass woke awakening to the ridiculousness of this, or the, you know, the average person. I think the average person is going to move in the direction, specifically because of how I think that ideas work. I think the average person is going to continue to move with power. I think they're going to continue to hold the ideas that are going to allow them to function the best in society and have the most advantages. I think that they're going to continue to move along this. There is, I think, a breaking point for progressivism where it just loses the battle of reality. I think there is a point at which that trying to run society in a completely unnatural way and denying basic realities about humans for so long eventually has a cost. But I think that will come from the function of society rather than like the average person waking up and being like, oh yeah, this is all wrong and I'm going to abandon this and
but
return
people are already
to
making decisions about moving to different places. So people are moving away from, let's say, Chicago, moving more towards in the woods. And then with Elon Musk. Well, okay, I got to look at those stats, but at least I know the people that I've talked to in New York, you know, people are moving out of New York City. People are going more into not even the suburbs, but sometimes more of the countryside. And with
and they'll end up ruining the countryside.
Exactly. What happens to every one of those states that is currently being flooded with blue voters? They become purple, and then they become blue, right? The people who move there don't become more conservative. They shift the community to the left. This is the same process we were talking about with liberals who get pushed out of the progressive coalition and then become conservatives. They drive the conservative coalition to the center and allow the left to become more crazy. It doesn't work the other direction.
Then you start to embrace the red-brown alliance, and then you start to view certain bimbos with a certain affection, as I do. So that's,
has there ever even been a successful red-brown alliance? I mean, I guess kind of in the 20s, you had a brief moment when the French,
you had a little bit.
When the French were occupying the Ruhr, you know, you had the kind of national Bolshevik, like actually you had the Communist Party of Germany, like under Karl Radek, was actually explicitly in 1923 like adopted like a Nazbol line to like and try get the folkish nationalist types to become commies, but
Strausser.
This was way before Strausser.
Yeah, this was way before Strausser. Yeah.
But it imploded in about a year because you know
the red brown alliance could be a thing. We just have to have the Free Corps like doming people on the streets. That's what
the Freikorps.
The Freikorps. Yeah.
Speaking of French-German relations,
this is the Prussian Serb. Oh god.
This is one of my favorites.
Yes. Alsace-Lorraine, yeah, of course. Yeah, I mean, they lost. Yeah, I mean, they got their asses handed to them in like in 1871. You know, like Bismarck was a real, you know, beast.
Well, when you Auron, when you were saying war with reality, can you paint us a picture of what exactly that may look like as far as decisions people make? I understand
the
most
enemies
people are not
of reality.
Yeah, I understand most people are not going to see the light, but when it still comes to people who realize that things are going in a crazy direction, do you see some kind of more decentralized communities sprouting up that are actually made up of people who have enough money, let's say, who may come from a higher echelon of power, that are also sick of it, that may be able to provide for these people, and maybe, I mean, this is kind of my hope, I don't know if this is exactly what's going to happen, but when I take a look at a lot of these bureaucrats, you know, like Mayor Lightfoot or whatever, they look like the most unremarkable people in the universe. You know what I mean? Like, their aura is just pure unremarkability. There is nothing about them that exudes anything interesting. And my hope is that a lot of the systems that they put in place will just collapse from just just from dying off, like like some kind of a part of the body that hasn't been exposed to air, just like shriveling away. Now, that may not be what's going to happen.
Like the vestigial eyes of the cave lizard.
Yeah, but it's like they don't have any, they're soulless. They don't have any quality.
They're small-souled bugmen.
Yeah, exactly. So I don't really see them building anything. And as a result, kind of like what Moldbug talked before about how he thinks that leftism, I don't know if this is his exact quote, but either he or the distributist talked about how they see the path of leftism as being the path of entropy. And that if it's entropy, you're not building anything, there's still going to be people around who are going to build something after you, so you may just collapse under your own unremarkability. I don't know.
Yeah, I think a lot of the kind of social deterioration that we've seen in the last 50, 60 years has been largely, and longer than that really, but it's been largely glossed over by technological innovation. Kind of the miracle of technology has rescued kind of the progressive march from really having to have a reckoning. Because just people have lived longer and all these amazing technologies. But we're getting to the point where I don't really care how many pixels you can cram onto my TV screen if I can't have children. If I can't raise a family.
Well, I wanted to talk about the children part.
If I'm lonely and I'm atomized and I feel disconnected from everything, slightly improved PlayStation graphics are just not going to fix it at the end of the day, right? Like, it's just not going to be enough. And so the miracle isn't really going to work anymore. That trick isn't going to work long term. And especially as we see some serious consequences coming from the horrible management of people who are in charge, we are seeing crime skyrocket, absolutely go out of control. That's going to hit home eventually.
Wait, Steven Pinker's wrong?
I know.
Fuck.
We're all shocked.
Couldn't have seen that coming, Mr. Flight Log. Oh,
hey, we got to get him on BTR.
Oh yes, I'll ask him what his favorite cocktail
Don't worry, I'll
is
do
at
the
Little St. James.
I'll do the hatchet work for you here. But no. Eventually this bill's going to come due, right? Eventually people who can't manage society, people who have no real direction, no real vitality for what the people are going to become and what the vision of the culture is going to be, eventually things are going to break down, and that's going to cause issues. And the hope is, like you say, Lev, that eventually what we do see is people in positions of power start realizing that they would be better served going elsewhere, right? That they would be better served by finding a new group of people to serve rather than kind of woke progressivism. We call this the rogue elite. Well, and you see a lot of.
Wait, you call this what? The what?
Your rogue elite, right? You want someone who is willing to break from the ruling ideology and finds that they're better served by seeking a power base elsewhere.
But the phrase itself, I'm curious about. Can you say again? Rogue elite? What does that
rogue
mean?
Elite.
Rogue elite. Thank you.
An elite who's gone rogue is no longer wholly sold out to the people who are currently.
That was the title of what's her face's book, Sarah Palin's Going Rogue.
Was it?
Yes.
Well, now
I have this terrifying vision. Do you remember the dance that Steven Pinker did when Biden got elected? Now imagine him.
Yeah, jeez.
Imagine him in a bunker underneath Little St. James, and it's like those garish red lights that Jeffrey Epstein had, and he's dancing in that room, and it's like filled to the. Never mind. I'm not gonna...
One day the progressives will finally come for him, and I will not cry.
Yeah. It'll happen.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's happening to Lindsay Ellis now. Apparently, that's another shocker. So,
now, I know that this is the way that history has gone. One last thing that I wanted to talk about as far as the past goes, and no, Gio, I'm not going to bring up the beating. I'm going to bring up something else.
I wanted to bring up one thing about what Moldbug predicted, but go ahead.
Okay,
yeah.
so real fast, one thing that I don't know, because again, I wasn't alive at that point, and I don't really, I haven't read anything yet or gotten primary sources about it. But what I'm curious about is how often did it happen in the past, as far as like not having certain, let's say, regulations, not having certain things to ensure these things don't happen, that let's say a husband who has a wife who grows old then dumps her, leaves her no security whatsoever, and just finds a younger wife. And again, I'm not talking about, cases here and there. This is just something I'm curious about. Like, I'm talking about, like, en masse scale. Like, sure. How cohesive were family structures? How do we know they were that cohesive? That's
there was
actually, I have a good anecdote about that. Like,
okay.
I tweeted about this a couple of weeks ago. It was from a book about... So in the Holy Roman Empire, modern Germany, there was an abbey, like an imperial abbey, like basically a kind of like a ecclesiastical principality called Ottoboron, and from about the 16th century. So basically, these were like peasants who like were working on lands owned by the church, and so effectively, like the abbot of like the nearby abbey was like their prince, essentially. Their sovereign, and he exercised like very direct, almost kind of like a marriage counselor to his peasant subjects. Like for example, there was an incident where like some like husband basically, whatever happened, some kind of domestic quarrel, he snapped and he straight up just kicked his wife and kids out of the house. And so, like, the abbot just takes him in and says, okay, look, man, you gotta make up with her. You gotta bring her back. If you do so, God will have your favor. Everything's gonna be better. You should, even if she's kind of a bitch, I mean, get her back.
You're not gonna get a divorce. What are we, an animal? Yeah.
No, and the husband just replies, basically, no way in hell, I'm not gonna get her back, never. And so the moment he hears that, he clips the guy in the dungeon until he finally agrees. So basically, in terms of protection, quite a lot, actually.
If I could answer that, Levin, then I have to bail out here soon. I'm running up against time. But there's this guy, Bertrand de Juvenal, who has a lot of really good work on how power works. And one of the things he talks about is the growth of the state. And he says, the state is more powerful than it's ever been. People who run the state now have way more power than any absolute monarch could ever have imagined throughout history. And yet people feel more liberated. And he says, why is that? Like, how is it that people think of themselves as freer while operating under a state that is more powerful than we've ever seen? And his answer is that is the recession of the private sphere, right? As the government has moved in, or as the private sphere has retracted from managing things like marital disputes, the moral issues, the way you would deal with all these different things. As the private spheres of competing power have stepped out, the power of the state has expanded to fill it. And so people feel less obligations to private spheres, so they feel more liberated, but at the same time, they're actually more and more beholden to the power of the state to mediate all of these different things. And so it's going to feel to us as people who are used to the state having a say in pretty much everything that there's no control, there's no one at the wheel. But that's not true. Throughout history, lots of people had a bit at the wheel. The civilization was far more of a patchwork of overlapping social institutions and spheres of influence, which managed with different expectations how people would interact with each other. It wasn't just a free-for-all with the state standing at the edge, shocking anybody who happened to get too close to the edge, right? And so if the state was to step back and we were to allow this more overlapping thing, first we would need those institutions of virtue to rise. But the problem, of course, is people probably won't fill those roles until they have to.
But how do we know those institutions worked?
Yeah, so because society's functioned, right?
No,
like,
all societies function all the time. And again, I know Geo hates me for bringing it
Our
up.
one isn't.
But, I know Geo hates me for bringing it up. But again, the example of Russia, the example of the serfs there, the way that they lived like animals, they treated their kids, their wives, just really, really horrible way. That would be a real hell on earth for people who were born around that time. And so my question when it comes to a lot of these things is, sure, you could have a society where like 2 or 3 bad eggs end up doing something and the government's not going to be involved, and sure, that's fine. But I guess like what is the extent where we could say, okay, this is like so much fucking suffering that's being caused because there isn't a recourse for the wife who gets dumped for a younger woman, and now she's
regarding Russian serfdom. Have you read the memoirs of Sava Purlevsky?
No, I'm gonna take a look at that. I'm gonna write that down.
They're the memoirs of a Russian serf in the 1820s and 1830s. You should read it. You'd be surprised at how, their existence wasn't as terrible as you're implying it to be. So do read it. But
okay, I'm gonna wait. How do you say that? Sava Polensky. I want to write that down.
No, Sava Purlevsky. Sava Purlevsky. I mean, you're a Russian. You have to know this, man.
Sava Polyevsky?
Something like that, yeah. Like it's in English, it's like Purlevskii. Purlevsky.
You're gonna have to send it to me later, but I appreciate.
Sure. I'll tweet it to you. Sure.
Yes. But I still don't know, like, when it comes to societies in general, how do we... And I don't want to be a Redditor where it's like, okay, this much suffering is acceptable, this much is not. But still, at a certain point, we have to say how much, let's say, things that would go on behind the scenes without, let's say, the wife or kids or whoever being able to go to some, to get some help. Like, at which point would it be, absolutely hell on earth mode that people may have been living, and maybe that wasn't the case, and if it wasn't the case, how do we know that?
Sure, it was hellish when there were like famines happening.
Sure, but
there was material conditions.
Sure, but even beyond the famine, I'm talking about, because I just want to push back, just because I think that a lot of people within more of the reactionary circles look back at these societies, and I'm not saying that, you're all saying, oh, it was so great, but still, there may be a tendency to overlook how hellish a lot of these more, let's say, familial, and I'm a big fan of the family, I think that's a great structure, but still, how much there may have been suffering within those environments as well, just to play devil's advocate here.
You keep asking the wife-beating question, man. I mean, you just love to...
I wanted to transition it away from the wife beating into the divorcing.
I wanted to... oh God.
No, just because how do we know? That's what I'm curious about. I want to be... I know. I want to be
Auron,
wrong.
what is your opinion on wife beating and divorce?
I am shockingly generally opposed to the beating of women wantonly.
Oh, you simp cuck!
I know. It's over.
I know.
I've lost my audience. Everybody send me down. Yep. Nope. No.
Like what books would you recommend, or what information would you recommend me to look at that can paint a better picture of how society was back then? Because I just don't know. That's where I'm getting at.
I mean, how much have we read? And I don't say this in any way derogatorily. How much have we read pre 1900? Right? Like how many books? How many books do we actually read from those eras? How do they actually portray things? And of course, the answer, people who are going to go back and say, well, they'll portray them in a positive light because that was era. Okay, then how do you ever know anything, right? That's
were they consciously aware of the fact that they were living in like traditional society and they portrayed it in a positive light? Yeah.
There's a point at which we get wildly meta to the point where you can't actually have a conversation about things, right? At the end of the day, here's the thing, right? Material conditions have obviously improved. Like people have more calories. There's a lot of things about life that are superior to Russian serfdom on that front. But we make a mistake when we think that every change over society was a positive one that happened to coincide with that technological innovation. When we trade sovereignty in the family, when we trade spheres of influence through society for direct state intervention in things, we do get a leveling effect. That's part of its promise. Yes, it does. It does make naturally unequal relationships more equal. The physical relationship between a man and a woman will always be unequal. Biologically, that's true. The only way to stop that is to end up having the state intervene to level that relationship? Yes, absolutely. Is there a cost for that? That's the question we have to ask. Are we making trade-offs, or is that only a good? That's the thing you want to know.
And finally, you have to go. I wanted to ask you, I don't know if you probably did. I had to delete my responses and block this trans person bodybuilder who was talking about how it was in reply to this lo-fi Republican tweet. Did you see this one about birth control?
Yes, I think I did see that one. Yeah.
Yeah. You know the reply I'm talking about, where they talk about how pregnancy is like an illness and it's like this terrible thing that it's not something that is a telos of biological existence, but rather, and I was trying to explain this to this person, but this person's an unironic neoliberal that worships science. And so therefore, if we have like the Shulamite Firestone exo-wombs for people who still want to have children, but we'll live in a world where having children will become impossible because the social relations of natalism would become impossible for various reasons. So this person believes that the framing of pregnancy and childbirth and raising of children itself is like a medical harm on par with like having, I don't know, some kind of birth defect or some kind of like it's a terrible thing that kills women, therefore it's bad. So what do you feel, and this is something that Moldbug predicted recently with his discussion with Anton,
yes, he did,
that anti-natalism and like self what did he call it, like, you know, Thomas Ligotti,
it's the self-sterilization, like
consensual
termination basically of reproduction. I think you can go endlessly in a loop on this, but I think Oswald Spengler probably put it best. Oswald Spengler said that a society that is discussing the merits of reproduction is already dead. A society that is already, because the math never works out rationally.
And he said for high society women, and this was a great quote, he said that in your video, that for women of high society in France and America, that marriage will become like a craft, a passing fancy to gain experiences. It's not something that is embedded within various minute and various conglomerated social, religious, cultural expectations and like weighing of odds. Rather, it is like something like eat, pray, love, I'm going to gain experiences. And it's like the marriage experience, like the marriage DLC pack of your life.
And to be fair, he said that this is also a function of men choosing this, right? So this is I think it's unfair to only hang it, though I think that's part of it. I think it's unfair to only hang it on necessarily like a modern female zeitgeist. It is also the male pattern of choosing of these things and what our society values, and how it, like I said, once you started having the discussion about whether children are worth it, whether it's worth it to have them, whether it's a burden or that, then it's already gone, because the energy to procreate, the energy to move the next generation forward has to be almost a consuming thing. And if your society is no longer able to summon that and is no longer able to do that almost instinctively, then it's already on its way out.
You know, in Denmark, I lived in Denmark for 6 months, and there's a lot of like beautiful young couples with beautiful young children. And there's just everywhere is clean. It's like a perfect place to raise a kid.
Elysium.
You know, in a healthy, loving environment. There's just so many resources available for young parents. And they generally have kids like at very, very young ages. Like they'll start in their like early to mid 20s because they have the social supports to do that.
Wasn't Denmark?
It's not even a question of like really cost. They live in a welfare state. So like literally like both parents will get a year off paid leave just to raise a child. It's very, there's a lot of there's a lot of promotion of breeding in Denmark just through all the benefits you receive.
If I remember correctly, wasn't Denmark the country that was like
high level education? You know, they really push procreation, you know, in a sustainable way.
Auron, what were you saying, that it was the country that what?
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I was saying, wasn't it the country that was like running ads like, please have sex with your boyfriend?
Yeah,
like, please,
I think it was.
Please go knock up your girlfriend. Like we will, we'll subsidize the kid. Just please go, like just go on holiday and knock up your significant other.
Well, Japan has like a population crisis because they work so much. You know, they don't even have time to date, let alone perform intimacy.
It's probably a lot of wasted time too. Like they pretend to sleep so that their boss sees how hard they work.
They have
in the office.
They have VR futanaris now, so that's God, why did they even fucking say that? My God.
Oh,
Terrible.
man.
Terrible. Oh my.
No, it's literally like that one. This guy had multiple screens throughout his house, like right next to each other. Like he had one in his bedroom, and he had like this anime girl that he can download. And he's like, it's nice to have, he's falling asleep. He's like, it's nice to have someone around. And the anime girl next to his screen, next to his bed, like says goodnight to him and kisses him goodnight. He's like, it's nice to have someone around. What is...
What is this? You gotta incentivize, like on a societal level, you have to incentivize child rearing and childbirth and human intimacy. You can't just fucking.
But also, there aren't that many Denmarkians in Denmark anyway. So and I think it's much more of a cohesive society. It's less things to worry about when you do that. Here we have a lot of Americans and a lot of people who are not really that smart. Like, let's face it, we have a lot of people here who are gonna end up being the fucking Morlocks because there isn't that much investment that's being put in them, unfortunately. Too many people, and I don't know. I mean, it is a shame. I wish everybody could get good education. Not education, but more,
possible.
like
I think that's completely possible. We have the highest GDP of any nation on earth, and we can't educate our citizens.
I mean, it's gonna take it's gonna take some military effort. By the way,
Auron,
but that's nothing.
You're talking love. Go ahead.
Auron, before you go, I wanted to present the following. This is what we are gonna have on Thursday, and I'm going to announce the Tuesday event after the Thursday event, but this is Thursday. Argue my position. Next Thursday, it's going to be about democracy, so it's a reverse debate. So basically, Armand is going to key us for democracy, but he's going to make a point against democracy, and this ghost represents the unknown person, because I don't know who we're going to have on to reverse debate him. I don't know what your schedule is, but if it is possible, I would definitely consider you to be an amazing person for this if you're interested. So I wanted to offer it to you first.
To Steelman democracy.
Yeah, it's one of those things. Yes.
Unfortunately, what I'd love to, we're buying a house, so
nice.
I will be very busy next week.
So this is congratulations. Wow. So this is then an announcement for everybody. Who do you want to face off against Armand for our democracy reverse debate? Let us know in the comments and let us know on Twitter and so on and so forth. So, Auron, I want to thank you so much, man. This was an amazing conversation. I still need to... Nigel, send me that book, because, again, I'm questioning. I have questions when it comes to what happened in the past
You're
and all that
obsessed with
stuff.
this last week. But...
No, because I think, like I said...
Okay, stop. About the
you
white
get the
beating.
idea. Yes, I know. No, because basically what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to figure out...
I wish I had a wife just to beat her, Lev, because you said that. No,
basically I want to figure out what are the things that people would generally push against the most when it comes to, how things may have been better back then when it comes to, familial societies and things of that nature, where I think we have lost a lot of that good stuff. But
I think any imposition on autonomy, that's really like... the core, like any imposition, especially in sexual autonomy, that's like that's like, to me at least, that's what every like argument hinges upon. But sorry, Auron, last word, and then
I agree, Gio. I think you're right that is going to be. I like I said, I don't think we're going to be able to escape the autonomy value. I think that's going to be hard for people to do. I think we can talk about the problems of going back, but just the idea of going back itself is almost impossible at this point, right? And that's the real problem. It's more about going forward and what gets carried into the future when it's time to make those changes. But yes, that said, guys, thank you very much for having me on. This has been a lot of fun. I definitely would love to talk to you again at some point. I had a great time.
Yes, please.
God bless.
Auron, thank you so much,
God
brother.
bless. Has been
and I'm going to shill everything right now for Auron McIntyre. So guys, follow Auron McIntyre on Twitter right now.
Oh, by the way, I forgot. Go subscribe to him on YouTube, but also subscribe to my channel. I actually have I know impossible. I have a new video out. I always say it's gonna be this day, but it's never that day. It's always the few days after. It's a painting video. I have GoPro footage of me painting, but also it's about this interesting theory about how the surface of painting captures time for the artist. So that's a really theory salt type of video. But please go and subscribe to Auron's channel. Auron or sorry. I get confused. I always said
Auron is correct, but a lot of people say like Aaron or Auron, and I just kind of like let it go because I don't want to spend a bunch of time correcting people when I'm a guest on their stuff.
I kind of say or like R like a arborescent. I don't know why I say it that way, but please go subscribe to Auron McIntyre. He just dropped this excellent. I've yet to listen to all of it, but I've listened to most of your videos with Bog Beef of the Good Old Boys podcast. By the way,
coming on BTR.
Is Bog Beef coming on BTR?
Yeah, hell yeah.
Oh,
Do you have Bog and Merrick? You got both of them?
I'm definitely gonna try, but I can tell you the date that Bog's gonna come down. I would love for you to come down as well if you're gonna be around. Let me just quickly search for this date. You have no idea how big of a spreadsheet I have here, fellas. So you have to. I mean, I've been booking events till July.
But while you're looking at it, next week we're gonna have a total nightmare apocalypse.
Oh god,
Galaxy Brain stream. It's gonna be me. It's gonna be I shouldn't say. It's gonna be Alexander Bard. Logo Dead Atlas.
Here's the link to
Paul Town, Joel Davis, John Pellich. Oh my God, that's gonna be meeting of the Titans right there. If we had Carlsbad in there, it'd be like the world would end. It'd be like when Antonio Inoki fought Muhammad Ali. Sorry, go ahead, Aaron.
Gio, if I can reverse shill, I like your stuff, and I don't have Instagram. Is there a place I can see your work and possibly get some of it if where you
I'm working on, I always say this, but for months now, but I'm working on a direct to sell website. But mostly my work you can see on Instagram. I do have a Facebook page, but that's more of an archive. But yeah, Instagram. And if you want to buy anything, especially if you want to buy any prints that I'm making, by the way, I have a special print I'm going to release on the 20th of April. No, nice. It's not going to be about Columbine. Although I actually do have a Columbine painting, but I'll never release it. It's terrible.
You don't want to do like a Randy Stair one? No,
maybe, but no, I have a special print for the other thing that happened on April 20th, which is the anniversary of the end of the Waco siege. I'm gonna have a special Lino Cup print, but if anyone wants to buy, please direct message me. I try to get to everybody, but if you want to buy something for your new house, painting or print, please message me if you have something in mind.
And here you could see Gio's prints in action. So
this is from the If You Want to Know GF series.
This is for our $30 Patreon members. So this is what you get. This is the process right here of making these prints. You know you want these prints. Look at how gorgeous they look. And when you become a $20 Patreon member, you are also going to get my father's beautiful magnets. I cannot wait to show you the definitely legit magnet. I think it is pretty much done now. And then the fat lioness is going to be coming on the way. Oh. And again, $5 members, you are going to get Patreon, special Patreon, not Patreon, special Discord server areas for patrons only, and you're going to get to write at Patreon chat.
And also, Auron, you have a Subscribe Star, I believe. You don't have a Patreon, Subscribe Star.
Yes, I've got a Subscribe Star, and I've got a merch store. I make memes, and people tend to like the memes, and so I put the memes on things. I'm in no way an artist, but people like to buy the memes, and so nice. I have those as well.
So here's the Subscribe Star.
So the man's buying a new house. You have to contribute right now.
Yes, and the merch store. Redbubble.com.
I'm assuming you have a wife?
Yes.
Oh, good. You have children yet?
Stepson, yes.
Oh, okay. So, please, he's buying a new house, and he needs the money. I'm assuming he needs money. Way more than we do. Me and Lever neats. We don't really need a lot of money. I shouldn't say that. No, we need money.
Yes.
Please. Damn, I just fucked myself right there. Oh boy. But for each Cornita's need, so please go to his Subscribe Star, and
the shop, the Auron McIntyre shop. Make sure you go there.
Yeah, you can buy Primo. Lev, do you have pictures of his merch?
I will try. I mean, I'm gonna.
It's embarrassing. It's all just random memes, but
Oh, that's amazing. That's what my buddy Woken Problematic does.
Here we go. Look
but
at
he
that.
makes his own memes. Let's look
Schmidt,
at this.
The Schmidt tall mug. What is that? Is that Carl Schmidt?
Where does
that's the
god.
friend foe distinction. There's
Oh my god.
and then
Oh wow.
You should have a mug that says,
Dementia.
"If you drink this, you are my foe." That's probably.
Well,
he's got the Word of Sovereignty Lie T-shirt. That's amazing.
Well, that's the first thing that I brought up on Clubhouse with Catherine Brodsky. I talked about the friend-enemy distinction in relation to, the cancel culture conversation there. And, like, one guy was shocked that I brought that name up. But anyway, that was, comes with the territory. But I think it is an important thing. It's the last thing that I'd say here. I really do think it comes down to friend-enemy distinction. I think a lot of people are feeling that already, and my hope is what you just said earlier, that there are going to be some people with money that look at the things that are happening and want to be rogue elites. But yeah, there we go. We're going to see what happens. I'm excited. I'm going to be an optimist. So Auron, I want to thank you so much, brother, for coming in here. You were amazing. I would love to have you on again. I know you're going to be busy when we're going to be doing the Thursday reverse debate stream. I would love to have again reverse debate or not reverse debate, doesn't matter to me. So I just want to thank you again,
You're a BTR,
Auron.
we're into mass debating, as
Yes,
Chris Chan
exactly.
says.
Yes, and one day we're all going to come out as gamers.
All right, guys. Well, thanks again for having me. I got to head out.
Thank you, Auron.
See
Thank you
ya.
so much.
Yeah.
Have a good one.
Take care. So some more announcements before we get going. On Sunday, not Monday, but on this Sunday, I am going to have the art stream with joining us Zero HP Lovecraft. He is going to be coming in there, and we're gonna be. I don't know what we're gonna be talking about yet. We're gonna figure that out, right, Gio? So here we go. This is the Twitter link, and I'm going to post a link to the art stream as well. So, guys, make sure you subscribe also to my YouTube. I do not show
we'll probably
my
be
YouTube
talking
enough.
about the human voluntary extinction thing. I had to delete this popular thread of mine because this person, I just could tell they probably reported it. It was about how they're going to normalize cheese pizza, if you know what I mean, through the certain issues. I had to delete that thread because this person called me a transphobe and said that it's a textbook anti-trans screed that I could have wrote a book about. But anyways, I love all people, as I don't mean to criticize. So anyways, yeah, we'll talk about that. I'm sure with ZHP, we always talk about fun things. It's kind of like my guilty pleasure that he's a regular on the show. Yeah, so
And,
it's going to be great. And I'll
and
probably
also
be carving a woodblock print for that stream instead of doing a drawing. So
Excellent. And also
Yeah.
follow Porco Rosso Flies Again. Follow Alexandra. That's Alexandra's Twitter account. Follow her there. She needs more followers, absolutely, positively. And Nigel, follow the great Nigel Carlsbad. You were amazing today, brother. You have a lot of knowledge. Please send me that book. I'm very interested in reading
I
it.
will.
All I know. Okay, all I know is that when my mom went to see my dad's dad, who was a drunk in the village, the gals
You've told
there,
me the story.
yeah, they were following her along, and they wanted to kill her. But anyway, I'm not gonna get into that right now. But anyway.
okay, end stream.
Anyway. Okay. Well, the stream
Enough.
is ending right now, but I just wanted to say one last thing. I want to do a shout out. DLive TV, Break the Rules. I wanted to do a shout out to one of our greatest contributors, Titty Don. He sent
Titty
in
Don.
100 lemons today. Titty Don, thank you so much for the lemons. When life gives you lemons, you know what I'm talking about. Anyway, guys, this is the end of the stream. Wait. Okay, yeah. Go follow all the YouTube links. You're going to see the YouTube link for the stream with Alexander Bard, logo, yada, yada, yada. That's coming up on Monday. Make sure you are there. And then the reverse debate stream this Thursday. A lot more. Oh, and also $50 patrons are going to get a beautiful, the Hammer War paint things, as well as
Warhammer
custom,
40K figures
yes.
painted by Jules.
Yes.
You're going to get that. You're going to get all the other prizes. You're also going to get a custom magnet, and you're going to get not just my print, but a Bob Ross style painting from me.
Exactamundo, Telemundo, and that is patreon.com.
Telemundo.
slash-
You're from Telemundo, aren't you? Get him off the stage. That was a great moment in history. Donald Trump destroying Telemundo.
Oh, man. Yeah, break the rules. Patreon.com/break the rules. Good night, everybody. Bye-bye.
God bless. Good night.
All right.
All right, here